Story 1. My dad is engaged to my ex-girlfriend, but she didn't tell him we dated for 3 years. My dad, 38M, is marrying my 24F ex-girlfriend, 26F. This is all such a mess, and I really don't know how I'm supposed to feel about it. For some backstory, my dad isn't my biological father. He and my egg donor started dating when I was 2 and got married when I was 4, and then got divorced when I was 16. Honestly, I was far closer to my dad than I was to my egg donor, and my egg donor would regularly abuse both of us. After the divorce, he tried to stay in touch with me, but my egg donor purposely isolated him from me because she was so mad that he finally became confident enough in himself to escape from her abuse. She was able to get a protective order placed on both of us to completely limit contact after the divorce, and then financially blackmailed me to continue to isolate me from him while she paid for my college. As soon as I graduated from college when I was 21, I completely cut off contact with her and reached out to him again. Even though it had been over 5 years since we last spoke at that point, I was very happy to have him in my life again. My ex-girlfriend and I dated while I was in college. I was pretty low-key about the relationship because I was pretty sure if my mom ever found out I was a lesbian, she would also cut me off completely. We started dating when I was 18 and dated for almost 3 years. I also never told my dad about her since we broke up only a few months after we reconnected. He did comfort me through the breakup, but he never met her or really knew anything about her. That brings us to last night. My dad and I have a standing dinner date for every other Wednesday, but we've both been busy for the last month, so I haven't seen him since before Thanksgiving. He told me that he would be bringing his girlfriend to tag along, and I have to admit that I was both sad because it wouldn't be just the two of us like it normally is, but also excited to finally meet her. Unfortunately, once I reach the restaurant, I'm absolutely floored to see my dad sitting there with my ex-girlfriend. I'm absolutely shocked to see them together, and when my dad introduces her to me, he introduces her as his fiancée and tells me that he wanted me to be the first to know. Apparently, they got engaged 2 weeks ago but hadn't told anyone except for her parents, who I've even met before. I must have had a shocked look on my face because he starts going into this whole thing about how he knows that I might be uncomfortable with him dating a girl who's so close in age to me and how the age gap concerned him too, especially because of my egg donor. Well, I would never compare him to her, since she was literally a groomer who started dating her tutoring student when he was 17 and then married him when he was 19. The entire time I was talking to him, though, I was staring right at my ex-girlfriend in complete shock. It ended up being way too weird for me, so I just told them that I needed to go after like 5 minutes. My dad texted me again today telling me how he was so sorry to ambush me with that information and that he was sorry that it came off the way it had. He told me again that he understood if the age gap made me uncomfortable, but he hoped I didn't think he was some kind of creep for dating a woman so much younger than him. He then told me that he felt like he was truly happy for the first time in the last 20 years, and he hoped that I could come to accept this even if it took me a long time. I, on the other hand, am just completely lost. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know that we dated, and I really don't know whether or not I should tell him. I don't have anyone to go to about this since he's literally the person I would vent to normally, so I just decided to let it out here. More info, again, my dad is not my B of A. I've never met my B of A and never want to. My dad is my dad, and that's it. I know I need to tell him, of course I do. It's a super awkward conversation, and I don't know how to do it. I really don't want to lose him again. Again, I hated not having him in my life when I couldn't, but I think I'd have to take a step back if he actually married her. Also, my ex literally didn't speak at all. She was just silent and wouldn't even look me in the eyes. My dad was the only one who talked for the entire 10 minutes I was there. I also haven't talked to her about it. I haven't talked to her at all in like 3 years. I don't know. I talked about my dad a lot when we were dating, but it's not like they'd ever met, so I have no idea whether she knew before last night. Personally, I don't care about the age gap. I don't even think she's too young for him or he's too old for her. Frankly, I think I'm even old enough to date a man my dad's age too. But he's the one that cares so much because I think he thinks that's why I was uncomfortable at dinner. He's also extra sensitive to it because of what my egg donor did to him. Edit, just clarifying again that my dad is not my biological father. My egg donor was a groomer and an abuser, but at least she didn't do that. Still doesn't excuse starting to date a 17-year-old at the age of 30. But whatever. Edit, I'm gonna text my ex-girlfriend. I know most of you think she already knew or that she targeted him or something, but I just don't believe that. For one, my dad and I don't have the same last name, and like I mentioned in a comment, we look nothing alike since he is Asian and I am white. I also never told my ex that he was not my biological father or told him his name. Do people do that? I don't think I've ever even said my dad's name when referring to him. That's so weird to me. I just always called him my dad. The only thing I told my ex about the past was that my egg donor forced my dad away from me, and I didn't really talk about it besides that because it hurt too much. I did tell her when my dad and I started reconnecting, but our relationship was already pretty much ending at that point. Like I said, there wasn't really any animosity or anything, we just sort of fell out of love with each other. She initiated the breakup, but after talking through it, it was completely mutual. Anyway, since I don't know whether or not she knew and I have no reason to believe that she was going out of her way to date my dad, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and tell her that she needs to tell him, and that if she doesn't, I will. Also, some of you ask me why I haven't told him already and why I said nothing at dinner. I want all of you understand how important my dad is to me. I had to lose him for so long, so I do treat our relationship with some extra care sometimes. I also feel extremely guilty about what happened to him, and I can't help but feel like it's partially my fault that he lost so much of his life. I'm almost certain that part of the reason he even stayed with my egg donor for so long was because of me. He was going through physical and emotional abuse on a daily basis, and a significant portion of it was to protect me from her as well. I'm pretty sure if he didn't love me as much as he did, and if he wasn't so scared how much worse my egg donor would treat me without him around to protect me, he would have left much sooner. I feel terrible about the idea of him being happy finally and me ruining it by telling him the truth. Update. My dad, 38M, is marrying my 24F ex-girlfriend, 26F. So, I wasn't really planning on making another post, but I've gotten multiple messages asking for one, and then I was scrolling through TikTok when I suddenly saw my post come up. It was actually bizarre since I've only had a handful of Reddit posts come up on TikTok. I remember that guy who played that weird song whenever he had sex with his girlfriend before. Most of the messages were really nice, except for the handful of people who told me that I should have a threesome with my dad and my ex. Seriously, what is wrong with you people? Anyway, I figured I'd let you all know what's happened since things have settled down a bit. This is going to be pretty long, so in case you just want to know the conclusion, my dad and Steph, my ex, are no longer together. My dad and I are fine, and I'm looking forward to putting this all behind us now. For the longer story, I would just like to remind everyone that my dad is technically my stepdad, but he's the only father figure I've ever had, and I've always just called him my dad. So, as I mentioned as an edit to my last post, I was planning on texting Steph. I did end up texting her, and like 5 minutes later she called me. We talked for like half an hour, and she basically told me that she was just as surprised as I was, and that she had no idea my dad was also her boyfriend. She said she was still reeling and was planning on telling him soon, but didn't know how to do it. I already know that some of you are going to ask her how I believe this. To answer a few questions I saw in the post, my dad doesn't have social media except for LinkedIn, LOL, and doesn't really have any pictures of me in his house. I also don't really use social media very much in an effort to keep the woman who gave birth to me out of my life. The only picture I've ever seen is one from my college graduation, and that one is just in his office. A lot of people also assumed that Steph and I went to the same college. I did meet her while I was in college, but we did not go to school together. I honestly just assumed my dad didn't really talk about me all that much, especially since our relationship was still in the early stage of reconnecting. I will admit that the comments did sort of get to me, and they did make me kind of suspicious, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. So at the end of the call with Steph, she told me that she was going to talk to him that night. I agreed and stayed by my phone, but I never got a call from my dad, which I thought was weird. I called Steph in the morning and asked her if she'd talked to him. She said she had and that he just needed some space right now. She said it would be best if I didn't talk to him about it. I thought that was really weird, so I decided to text my dad anyway. I asked him if Steph had talked to him, and he said that they had. I asked him if he wanted to talk about it, and he said he would prefer not to and that he thought it would be best if we just took a step back from our relationship. He said that he was really dealing with a lot and this was all extremely hard for him. I have to say I was pretty heartbroken when he said that, and it really got me thinking. A lot of you asked me if I'd be okay with my dad marrying Steph, and honestly, I really wouldn't be. I don't really like the idea of him dating anyone just because of how easily he's manipulated. I knew he had been in a relationship, but I'd always told him that I didn't really want to hear about it and that all that mattered was that he was happy, so we never really talked about his romantic life. However, I realized that even if I wasn't happy about it and even if I seriously hated it, I wouldn't want to risk losing my dad over it. He mattered way more to me, so I decided I'd give him a day and then went over to his place on Sunday. He looked pretty uncomfortable when he saw me, but I wasn't taking no for an answer, so he let me in. We sat in silence for a few moments before I basically just told him that we needed to talk about this. He was pretty quiet and he was pretty much sitting as far as he could from me, so I told him that I really didn't want my previous relationship with Steph to change my relationship with him and that I was okay with him getting married. He looked kind of confused in what being friends with Steph had to do with any of it. It was my turn to be confused, so I asked him if Steph talked to him again. He said she had, and he didn't really know how to deal with the information. It really seemed like he was tiptoeing around the subject, and he wouldn't even look me in the eyes, so I finally just asked him what Steph said. She told him I was in love with him. That's right, this crazy manipulative word I can't use here apparently really told him that I had admitted my sexual attraction for him years ago. Apparently, her story was that we were friends, not girlfriends, just friends, when I was in college and that we'd gotten really close, and I told her my secret. I was pretty appalled to learn that she said that, but I had told her about how the woman who gave birth to me had claimed that my dad and I had an illicit and inappropriate relationship to get the protective order. She knew that would be a sensitive topic for my dad, and apparently she encouraged him to take some space away from me. At that point, I was enraged. I couldn't believe she would really do something like that. After that, I told him the truth. I told him about how Steph and I had dated years ago and how I was pretty sure she made all of that up so I wouldn't tell him. He believed me pretty quickly, especially when I showed him a picture of the present she gave me for our first anniversary. My dad didn't really say anything besides just apologizing to me over and over again and telling me how sorry he was for believing her. I told him it was okay, and we just hugged it out. After that, he called up Steph and asked her to come over. I've honestly never seen him like that. He's normally such a happy guy, but the look on his face was terrifying. Steph did end up coming, and it looked like she knew what was going to happen because she was just staring at the floor. I won't lie, when I saw her, I really wanted to just rip her hair out of her head. But sitting beside my dad really helped me keep calm. My dad told her that he knew the truth. Steph apologized over and over again to both of us. Apparently, she had no idea that I was his daughter at the beginning of the relationship, and she didn't make the connection until they had been dating for over a year and had started discussing marriage. She said that she felt like it was too late at that point and that she felt like she couldn't lose him. That was apparently why she pushed back on the idea of meeting me and why she really didn't want to have that dinner with me either, although she told him that it was because of the age gap and that she was afraid of me judging her. Apparently, she was the one who convinced him that I'd be really against the relationship because of the age gap. She said that she told him the story about us being friends and me admitting my fantasies about my dad to her because she hoped that it would keep the two of us apart. When I asked her if she was really going to ruin my relationship with my dad over a lie like that forever, she said that she was going to tell the truth once they were married since she was sure he wouldn't want to go through a divorce again. Apparently, she would never dream of separating us again. What a load of that was. Steph was crying pretty much the whole time, and getting all of the information out of her was like pulling teeth. But eventually we learned the truth, or at least as much of it as we could. She begged him not to end the relationship, but my dad was pretty much just done with at that point. That's when she really started going hysterical, and I swear she had a full mental breakdown. She kept screaming at me how I ruined her life, and I was honestly scared she was going to hurt me or my dad. Luckily, she didn't, and she did calm down after a while, although she was still curled up on the floor. I felt pretty bad for her seeing her like that, but then I remembered what she tried to do, and I just got angry all over again. I'm guessing some of my dad's neighbors called the police because they knocked at the door asking about a domestic disturbance. My dad is really scared of the police because of how the woman who gave birth to me had weaponed them against him in the past, so I ended up going to talk to them. Steph tried to grab me as I walked to the door, but she couldn't even get herself off of the floor. I told the police that she was refusing to leave, and eventually they were able to escort her out. My dad and I were pretty shaken up about that, but we decided to try getting some takeout and watching one of our favorite movies together. We were pretty much hugged together the entire time, and we fell asleep on the couch together. It really felt so good. I was just so happy. So that's that. Steph is officially out of my dad's life, and I have convinced him to change the lock so she doesn't try to get in here again. I've also tried convincing him to try to get a protective order against her, but he isn't willing to do that just yet. He's convinced that he's not going to be able to get one, so it would be a waste of time, but the woman who gave birth to me had done it pretty easily, so I figured there was a good chance anyway, especially with the police report I'm guessing the officers had to file. In the meantime, I'm going to stay with him at least until he gets the locks changed. I told him I'd like to move in here with him once my lease ends in March, and he told me he'd think about it. Right now, I just want to be around my dad. I hope you're all satisfied with the update. I can't say I'm happy about everything that happened, but I'm really glad that my dad and I are okay. I feel really bad about what happened, especially for my dad, but I think he just needs to take some time away from dating, especially because of how many times things have gotten messed up for him. He agrees, and he said that he thinks he'd just like to focus on work and building up our relationship as well. I really hope that I can help him through all of this. I'm probably not going to post anything after this, but thanks for following along. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Fiancé suddenly broke up with me because she needed to be single. Months later she showed up at my door pregnant and claims it's mine, even though she left me to date other guys. Me and her have been together for about 5 years. We started dating in high school, junior year for me, sophomore for her. I still remember how nervous I was asking her out after chemistry class. Honestly, I thought we were on track for the whole marriage and family thing. We got engaged a while back and everything seemed perfect. I was so effing happy, man. Like the happiest I'd ever been in my life. We'd been talking about our future, where we'd live, how many kids we wanted, all that stuff couples do when they think they're going to spend their lives together. We even had a small apartment we were renting together. She was finishing up her degree and I had been working full-time at this place my uncle got me into. The pay isn't amazing, but it's steady and has benefits, which is better than a lot of people our age have. We would go on dates every Friday, just a tradition we kept up. Sometimes just grabbing burgers and catching a movie. Other times we'd try a new restaurant or go bowling or whatever. We hardly ever fought about anything serious. Sure, we'd bicker about normal stuff like whose turn it was to do dishes or what to watch on Netflix, but nothing major. Then one day she just blindsides me completely. No warning signs, no fights, nothing that would make me think something was wrong. It was a Tuesday night, I think maybe Wednesday. I had just gotten home from work and was watching some YouTube videos waiting for her to get back from class. She comes in and she looks weird, like she'd been crying or something. She asks to talk and starts with, "You're not going to like what I have to say." She spends like 15 minutes crying and telling me how she'll always love me. But apparently we got together too young and she needs to be single for a while. I was confused as what does that even mean? So I pressed her to explain what the hell she was talking about. I mean, we'd been together for 5 years, we were engaged, we had a life together. You don't just throw that away because you need to be single. That's not how this works. She gave me this whole list of crap reasons that made no sense. Something about not wanting to be responsible for my happiness, wanting to go places without worrying about me, and other BS that just left me more confused. Said she felt trapped and needed to find herself. Like what the does that even mean? This isn't some rom-com movie, this is our life. I told her she could already do all that stuff right now and we didn't need to break up. I offered to give her space or whatever she needed. I even suggested we could take a break from wedding planning if that was stressing her out. I was desperate, trying to find any solution that didn't involve us breaking up. Nothing was changing her mind though. She just kept shaking her head and crying, saying she'd already made up her mind. Finally, it clicked and I asked if this was really about her wanting to date and see other people. She denied there was anyone specific she wanted to date, but ultimately admitted that yeah, that's basically what she wanted to do. I was completely broken by this. Felt like someone had ripped my heart out and was stomping on it right in front of me. She tried to tell me again that she loved me and I just told her to keep that to herself. Then she had the nerve to ask if I was going to be okay. Like what the kind of question is that? Of course I'm not going to be okay. I told her that wasn't her problem anymore and walked right out. I drove around for hours that night just trying to clear my head. Ended up at my buddy Jake's place. He let me crash on his couch for a few days while I figured out what to do. I couldn't stand being in our apartment. She tried calling and texting multiple times after that, but I just deleted everything without reading and blocked her on everything. Phone, social media, email, everything. I wish I could say I handled it like a man and didn't care, but the truth is I fell into a really dark place for a while. Jake tried to get me to go out, meet new people, but I wasn't interested. Eventually, I went back to the apartment. She had moved most of her stuff out by then, left a note saying she was staying with her friend Amber for a while. I threw the note away without reading all of it. Those first few weeks were the worst. I come home from work and just sit in the dark thinking about everything. I stopped eating regularly, started drinking more than I should have, called in sick to work a couple times when I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed. My mom came by once or twice, tried to talk to me, but I just told her I was fine and needed some time. The only thing that kept me going was work. I threw myself into it, taking extra shifts whenever I could. One of my coworkers, this older guy named Phil, noticed something was up and took me under his wing a bit. He'd been through a nasty divorce years back and would let me vent during lunch breaks. Never gave me any advice, just listened. That helped more than he probably knows. Fast forward about 3 months without any contact. I was doing a bit better, not great, but functioning. Started hanging out with Jake and some other friends again. Even went on a date that my cousin set up, but it was awkward as hell and I wasn't ready. Then yesterday happens. I'm pulling into my driveway when I notice a car parked across the street. Something about it seemed familiar, but I didn't think much of it. Then she gets out and starts walking toward me. My first instinct was just to ignore her and go inside. I mean, what could she possibly have to say that I would want to hear? But as I'm walking toward my door, she calls my name. I turn around and snap, "What?" And that's when I see it, she's obviously pregnant. I just stood there not knowing what to say. Like, what do you even say in that situation? She apologizes for sneak attacking me, but says she's been trying to reach me for a while and knew I had her blocked, but she needed to talk to me. Said she'd even come by a few times when I wasn't home and left notes, which I guess must have blown away or something because I never saw them. I wasn't happy to see her at all, especially not pregnant with some other guy's kid after everything. I mean, she broke up with me to go be single and date other people, and apparently she wasted no time doing exactly that. I tell her we don't have anything to talk about and turn to go inside. That's when she yells that the baby is mine, which stops me dead in my tracks. At first, I thought I misheard her or that it was some kind of sick joke. I turn back around and just stare at her for a minute. She's crying again, mascara running down her face. I ask her what the hell she's talking about. To cut a long story short, she claims she's 4 months pregnant, which would mean she was about a month pregnant when she broke up with me but didn't know it. She says she didn't even suspect until the 2nd month when she missed her period but got mixed results on home pregnancy tests. Then she went to a clinic and got it confirmed. According to her, she spent the next month trying to convince herself to get an abortion but couldn't go through with it. She begged me to let her come in so we could talk. Said she didn't feel comfortable discussing all this on my front lawn where the neighbors could hear. After standing there for what felt like forever, I finally let her in. The apartment looked different with her in it again. I hadn't changed much since she left, still had the same furniture, same pictures on the walls, though I'd put the ones of us in a drawer somewhere. She noticed I still had the plant she had given me for my birthday last year. Seemed surprised it was still alive. I don't know why I kept watering the stupid thing. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, as far from each other as possible. I was probably meaner than I should have been. I told her I didn't believe it was mine, that she wanted to go other guys, and now she got knocked up by some dude who wants nothing to do with her, so she's running back to me hoping I'll play daddy. She started crying and said I was right to think that, but swore she never even went out with anyone else. At this point, I was getting really frustrated. I asked her if she really expected me to believe that she broke up with me to be single and date other people, but then just didn't for 3 months while pregnant. It made no sense. To summarize the rest of our conversation, she claimed she never went out with anyone else and never even got the chance. She swears she was telling the truth about not having anyone specific in mind when we broke up. Said she had this overwhelming feeling of panic and like she was missing out on something, But after we broke up, she realized what she was really missing was me. She thinks being pregnant made her hormonal and impulsive, and that the urge to break up with me came out of nowhere. She hadn't been planning it at all. Said she woke up the day after we broke up feeling like she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She asked if I ever read any of her texts or emails. When I said no, she told me that the very next day after our breakup she texted saying she wanted to talk and take it all back because she knew breaking up was a mistake. Apparently, she sent me dozens of messages over the next few weeks trying to explain and apologize. I asked her why she didn't just come find me in person if it was so important. She said she did try, but I was either at work or at Jake's place. She even went to my mom's house once, but my mom told her I didn't want to see her and that she should respect that. I didn't even know about that until now. She said she didn't tell anyone at first, not her parents, not her friends, nobody. She was in denial for a while, hoping it would just go away somehow. Then when she couldn't deny it anymore, she considered abortion, even made an appointment, but couldn't go through with it. That's when she started trying to reach me more urgently. By this point, we'd been talking for a couple hours. I got up to get some water and noticed she looked really tired. Pregnant women need to rest, right? I don't know anything about this stuff. I asked if she wanted something to drink and she asked for water too. So here's where I'm at right now. After talking with her for hours, my heart is still up from all this. Part of me wants to just forget all my doubts and fears and take her back. Be a husband and father. I mean, that was the plan anyway, right? Just maybe not so soon and definitely not like this. But as much as I want that, I refuse to be a father to a kid that isn't mine with a woman who left me to go sleep with other guys. I mean, I'm not against being a stepdad someday, but I can't do that with someone who deliberately shattered my heart. I've demanded a paternity test. Neither of us really knows how to arrange one, but she's going to ask her doctor at her next appointment. I don't know if we have to wait until the baby is born or what, but I need this for my peace of mind. She says she's fine with it because she has zero doubt it's mine since she claims she hasn't been with anyone else. She showed me ultrasound pictures. That got a little choked up seeing them, thinking that could be my kid in there. But I can't let myself go there until I know for sure. I can't get my hopes up just to have them crushed again. Before she left, she gave me a letter. She said she wrote about a month ago. Said she'd been carrying it around hoping to give it to me if she ever got the chance to talk to me. I didn't read it until after she was gone. In it she talks about deeply regretting hurting me, how much she loves me, and how breaking up was the biggest mistake of her life. Says she panicked about the future and let her fears get the best of her. There was a lot in there about how she wants us to be a family, how she's thought about nothing else for months. I don't know what to believe anymore. She seemed sincere, but then again she seemed happy with me right up until the moment she wasn't. How do I know this isn't just another impulse that she'll regret later? Here's what I'm struggling with. 1. If the kid is mine, where do I go from here? Do I try to make it work with her for the baby's sake? Do I just co-parent and keep my distance emotionally? I know what my parents would say. They're old school and would expect me to do the right thing and marry her. But is that the right thing for any of us? 2. How do I believe she hasn't been with anyone else since she left me? Even if the kid is mine, that doesn't mean she didn't sleep with someone else after getting pregnant. I know it might make me in, but if that's what happened, I don't want her back. I couldn't handle that kind of betrayal, even if technically we were broken up. 3. If the kid isn't mine, this is obviously a non-issue because that's a hard no for me without question. I'd be cutting contact again immediately. She says she wants to do whatever it takes to make this work. She's offered to pay for couples counseling and give me any type of transparency I want. Said I could have access to her phone, her email, whatever would make me feel secure. I think that's a good sign. Why would she offer that if she had something to hide? I told her I needed time to think and process all this. She seemed disappointed but understood. She left her new number and address. She's still staying with Amber and asked me to call her when I was ready to talk more. Said her next doctor's appointment is in a week and she'd like me to be there if I can. My head is completely spinning right now. For months ago, I would have been thrilled to become a father and make this woman my wife. Those feelings are still there, but now they're all mixed up with pain and hurt and distrust. I keep going back and forth between wanting to believe her and thinking this is all some elaborate lie or manipulation. I called Jake after she left and told him everything. He thinks I should get the paternity test before making any decisions, which I was already planning to do. But he also warned me not to get sucked back in just because of the baby. Said I should be sure it's her I want, not just the idea of having a family. My mom keeps calling, but I haven't answered yet. I'm not ready to tell her about all this. She never really liked my ex that much anyway, always said we got too serious too young. Guess she was right about that. I haven't been able to sleep much since she showed up. Keep thinking about what it would be like to be a dad, whether I'd be any good at it. My own dad wasn't around much when I was growing up, always working. I don't want to be like that, but I also don't want to force myself into a relationship that isn't right just because of a kid. Any advice would be appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning here. Edit. There are way too many to reply to individually, so I'll add this update to answer the main points people keep bringing up. I heard what everyone was saying about me having issues with how I've handled this. I get it. I've been an ass about some things. I was totally ignorant about pregnancy hormones, but I've read up on it today and see how this could have affected her. From what I'm reading, it really can mess with your head in ways I never realized. Please understand that when I wrote this, I had just finished talking with her and my emotions were raw and confused. I didn't mean to come across like such a jerk. To the people asking if I've ever loved her at all, yes, of course I have. I love her with all my heart. I know that now and knew it last night. That's why this has been so hard. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be this torn up about it. For those saying I should have at least read her messages, you're right. I probably should have, but at the time I was too hurt and angry to think clearly. It was easier to just block it all out. I realize now that was immature. To answer the most common question, yes, it's possible to do a paternity test before birth. Apparently they can do it with a blood test from the mother now, though it's expensive. We're looking into options. I can't answer all your questions because I'm heading out to talk with her again. I can't let this go. I've been given a second chance with her and that's all I want. I'm still going to ask for a paternity test just for my peace of mind. I hope she understands even though I know it might hurt her feelings. I think I'm just going to take a leap of faith and trust that everything she said about hormones and never really wanting to break up is true. Sorry to anyone I offended because I came across as a grade A douchebag. This situation has brought out the worst in me, but I'm trying to do better. Update. Can't believe how much this blew up. Thanks for all the comments, even the ones calling me names and stuff. I guess I deserve some of that. A lot of you were asking for an update, so here it is. I wanted to give everyone an update on what's happened since the weekend. A lot has happened. Well, not really that much, but it feels like a lot to me. After reading your comments and doing some research, I found out that pregnancy hormones can really mess with some people's minds, like way more than I ever realized. I read stories from women who made crazy impulsive decisions, had complete personality changes, or developed weird phobias during pregnancy. Made me realize that maybe what happened wasn't entirely her fault. I went to the apartment where she's staying with her friend Amber. I was nervous as hell on the drive over, kept changing the radio station because nothing sounded right. I almost turned around twice but made myself keep going. When I got there, Amber opened the door and seemed surprised to see me. She gave me this look like she wasn't sure whether to let me in or slam the door in my face. I'd always gotten along okay with Amber before all this, but I guess she's been there for my ex through everything, so she's protected now. Amber was nice enough to leave so we could have a long talk. She made a point of saying she was just going to the coffee shop down the street and would be back in 2 hours, which I think was her way of warning me not to upset her pregnant friend. I'll spare you all the details, but it was long, painful, and filled with crying, mostly by me, embarrassingly enough. I completely broke down. Any pretense of being strong and unaffected just washed away within minutes. She makes me really vulnerable, and while I don't like that much, once I got everything off my chest, I felt a million times better. She was patient, kind, and loving. This was the girl I've known all these years. We talked about everything and what had happened in the 3 months we were apart. I told her how devastated I was, how I couldn't understand why she would throw away everything we had. She listened and just kept apologizing, saying she didn't have a good explanation other than she felt overwhelmed and panicked. From her side, she confirmed she never went out with anyone else. She did have two guys who knew we were broken up ask her out, but she told the first one she wasn't ready, and by the time the second one asked, she already knew she was pregnant. She showed me her phone and said I could look through her messages if I wanted to, but I didn't feel the need to. Something about the way she was talking to me made me believe her. She told me about how lonely she'd been these past months, how she'd cry herself to sleep almost every night regretting what she'd done. She said she'd drive by my work sometimes hoping to catch a glimpse of me but never had the courage to come in. She'd written me dozens of letters that she never sent because she didn't think I'd read them. The pregnancy has been hard on her. She's been sick a lot, had to take time off from school. Her parents were upset at first but have come around and are being supportive now. She hasn't told them we're talking again yet. After hours of talking, we ended up falling into each other's arms. By this time, Amber had texted saying she was heading back, so my ex came home with me to continue our conversation. I was nervous about having her back in our old apartment, but it felt right somehow. We stayed up almost all night just talking. She told me about her doctor's appointments, showed me more ultrasound pictures. We talked about names, both agreeing we didn't want to know the gender until birth. We ended up spending the whole weekend together. I'll be honest, I thought I might be grossed out by the pregnant sex thing because I've never even thought about it before. I wouldn't have even considered it if I thought for a second the kid wasn't mine. But it wasn't weird at all, well, a little weird maybe, but in a good way. That's the big takeaway from all this. I now believe her 100%, and here's why. She's the one insisting on a paternity test. If she wasn't sure, she probably wouldn't push for it, but she says she's never been with anyone else, and I believe her now. She said she wants us to have the test so that I never have any doubts and we can move forward with complete trust. Yesterday she had a pre-scheduled OB/GYN appointment and arranged for me to go with her. I was nervous about it, never having been to one of these before, didn't know what to expect or if it would be awkward with the doctor. Here's the cool part, her doctor is this guy who can't be more than mid-30s or so, and he was the coolest I've ever talked to. Seriously, if I met this guy away from the doctor's office, he'd be a first-rate bro. He didn't treat me like some clueless idiot, just explained everything as he went along. We did the exam and I got to see the baby on the ultrasound. That's when it really hit me that I'm going to be a dad. The doctor pointed out different parts, the head, the spine, little arms and legs, said everything looked healthy and normal. The heartbeat was so fast, like a little drum. I'm not an emotional guy usually, but that got to me. After the exam, the doctor asked her if now would be a good time for the talk, and she said yes. I had no idea what was happening, but she explained she wanted him to talk to me and that it was her idea. She left and the doctor and I chatted. He said my girlfriend had spoken with him about everything over a month ago, and while he couldn't discuss her medical condition specifically, he wanted me to know the facts about female hormones and how they can affect women during pregnancy. Like I said, coolest guy ever. He broke it down so I could understand. He talked about how pregnancy causes huge hormonal changes that can affect mood, decision-making, and even personality. Said it's not uncommon for women to have moments of panic or make impulsive decisions, especially early in pregnancy when hormones are going crazy but they don't even know they're pregnant yet. He also mentioned that she had talked to him yesterday about paternity testing and they were setting it up for next week. He said, for both our peace of mind, we should go ahead with it, even though based on her history and the timeline, he had no reason to doubt the baby was mine. He also spent a few minutes talking about how I was feeling and even shared a story about how he and his wife nearly separated over a pregnancy-related issue. They'd been fighting a lot during her first trimester and he'd actually moved out briefly before they worked things out. Now they have 3 kids and are happier than ever. Said sometimes the hardest times can lead to the strongest relationships if you're willing to work through them together. I left that day feeling 100% confident that this is a relationship worth fighting for. I honestly think she just had a crisis caused by a mix of frustration, hormones, and emotions, and she didn't even understand why she was having those feelings. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it helps explain it, and that's enough for me to move forward. Yesterday we went to dinner with Jake and his girlfriend. It was a bit awkward at first. Jake kept giving her these suspicious looks, but by the end of the night things felt almost normal. Jake pulled me aside at one point and asked if I was sure about all this. I told him I was, and he said he'd support me whatever I decided. I just finished moving her stuff back to my house about a few hours ago. Not everything. She's keeping some things at Amber until we get settled, but enough that she can stay here comfortably. When she gets off work tonight, we're going to start our journey to make this work. I'm not rushing things because either of us might have built up emotions we're not even aware of yet. But I already have a ring, the same one she gave back when we broke up. I couldn't bring myself to return it, and if all goes well for a month or two, I'm going to ask her to marry me again. Both our families would prefer us to be married before having a child, which reminds me now I have to tell my parents they're going to be grandparents and also that we're back together. That should be fun. My mom is going to have a lot to say about all this, I'm sure. Her parents already know about the baby, of course, but not that we're trying again. Her mom also never liked me much to begin with, so that's going to be an interesting conversation. Amber helped us move some of her stuff and seemed happy for us, though she did pull me aside and give me the "if you hurt her again" speech. I assured her that wasn't going to happen, but I understand where she's coming from. She's been there through all of this, seen all the tears and pain. Anyway, thank you all so much for helping set me straight. I wanted to believe her but didn't buy the hormone thing. Thanks to some of your stories, I now know better. The paternity test is scheduled for next week. I know what the results will be, but it's good to have that confirmation so we can move forward without any doubts or questions. I might update again if anything significant happens. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Dad married a new woman after my mom passed away when I was 14, who tried to replace my mom and make me call her mom. So I left. Now, years later, they found my address. My mom passed when I was 14. I was always closer with her than my dad, so I took it very hard and still missed her every day. My dad moved on extremely quickly. I'm talking about 1.5 months later, and he was openly dating his current wife. I suspect he was cheating on my mom. She moved in 4 months after my mom's death, then 9 months after her death. They announced their engagement on my birthday as one of my gifts. I obviously didn't take it well, made a scene, dumped the cake they got me, and walked out. I disappeared for a few days until they were about to put out a missing person/runaway report. I was forced to go back. They tried to get rid of all evidence of my mom. Pictures, personal effects, memories, and others. I kept what I could and hid some others. They wouldn't let me celebrate her birthday or anything to do with my mom. They tried to force me to call Dad's wife Mom. I never did. They would ignore me when I called her by her name. She would introduce herself as my mom. I would correct her every time. It got to the point that I stopped talking to her unless absolutely necessary, or if I was correcting her. These talks were usually one-word answers. My dad got angry every time I didn't call her mom, use her first name, or introduce her as Dad's wife. I once spent 2 weeks not talking to either of them when I was 16 because I was ruining their family dynamic. Until I can be a part of the family, there was nothing to say or do as one. They caved at about the 15th day of no communication/interaction. I turned 18 and left for uni and went extremely low contact and didn't go back. When I was 21, I got engaged to my fiancée. She knows about my relationship with my dad and his wife. She respects it and is on my side. When they found out my dad and his wife had a fit, they didn't know I was seeing anyone. My dad's wife posted on social media saying she was excited that her son, me, was getting married, with a bunch of other things saying she can't wait until she becomes a grandma. I made a short post saying I am not and never was her son, and she won't be a grandma to any future kids. My dad got mad, saying I was disrespecting my mother and embarrassed her. I asked who we were talking about because my only mother was my real/only bio mom who gave me life. At this point, I lost both of my parents on that day when I was 14. That was 3 years ago, and we went back to low/no contact. But my wife is about 8 months pregnant. They showed up to my house. I never gave them my address. They wanted to talk and meet my wife. I didn't let them in and said to turn around and go back to where they came from. But apparently, they decided they wanted to move to my city/state to be closer and repair the relationship between us. She said she missed her son and wanted to be a better mom and grandma. I called them delusional and told them to leave and slammed the door. They bought a house about 5 minutes away from us. This has all been way too much for me, and my therapist wants me to let them in, but I would rather cut all contact. It wouldn't be so bad if they just would stop trying to replace my mom and act like she never existed. I honestly don't know much about my dad's wife. I don't even know if I know who my dad is anymore. My wife is struggling to support me emotionally and doesn't know how to help. Please, internet strangers, how do I convince them? Dad and dad's wife. She is not and will never be my mom. Date 1. Hello all. Thanks for your comments and feedback. I did read them all. I couldn't reply for some reason. Also, for those who said I must be fake because of a lack of replying/updates, the post got so much attention that it was locked in 24 hours. I do have a life with work and an 8-month pregnant queen that I have the privilege of calling my wife that took priority. To answer some questions and to clarify, my wife, me, and our unborn child are doing good overall. My wife is over being pregnant at this point. Our child should be here in the coming weeks. I did find a new therapist. I called to cancel the rest of my appointments on the books, and he did not take that well, so I have put in a complaint. I met with my new one, and I like her a lot better. I feel like I'm actually being heard and actually getting the help I needed. I want to make this clear, I am 24. My dad's wife is 38, 14 years older than me. My dad is 52, 14 years older than his wife. So, when she entered my life, I was 14 and she was 28. There were also theories about how my dad might have had something to do with my mom's death. That is not the case, but I still believe they were together before she passed. I am investing in a security system, but it will be a few weeks until they can install it. But for now, we have a doorbell cam and some cheaper cameras. Social media, since the post about her being excited about being a grandma and my wife and I getting engaged, we have locked down all social media. My wife and I are not active on any platforms anymore except for messaging or sharing pictures. We found the leak as well. It is my wife's sister's husband, Bill. We had a family dinner where we had planned on working on the birthing plan. Bill was insistent on being there, which was odd as he was not a part of it to begin with. While we were waiting for my MIL to get home, I shared what happened between my dad and how it made me/my wife feel. Bill got visibly uncomfortable. When we called him out on it, he denied it, but it was obvious. Sal called him out, and he broke down. He said he had been talking with them because we need all the family support we can get, and they should know their grandbaby. This caused an argument. It ended with Sil moving out and staying with us. They have no kids and had some issues. I think it is over for them. I will never trust him. Our birthing plan has been locked down and secure, made a day later without Bill, but we have some just in case of crazy showing up plans. Everyone who needs to know the plan/details know now. It is surprisingly hard to get a protection order where I live. It is heavily dependent on violence or physical contact. Technically, what they have done is not against the law yet. They are perceived as no real danger at this time since there were no threats made, and they left when asked to. They have free will to move wherever they want. Also, since a family member gave another family member my address, it is fair game in regards to grandparents' rights. It is only when my wife and I have lost custody or are unable to care for them. But my MIL and FIL will be taking on that role if needed. My wife and I are not in a position to move. We just bought our house when interest rates were low, and my in-laws helped with a down payment. It is nothing massive, but it is home and perfect for our starter family. My dad and his wife are unable/shouldn't have kids. I don't know from what side made it impossible, so that may be why the constant pressure. I did write my dad a letter summing up why I want no contact, how I feel about what they did, how his wife is not my mom and will never be. If I feel like giving them a chance, it is on my/my family's terms. Specified that my family is me, my wife, and any possible children moving forward. They are not to talk to my wife or I at any time unless it is through our lawyer. He can decide what information to pass on. They are not welcome around us at any point, including our house, school, daycare, social gatherings, birthdays, Christmas, BBQs, etc., as well as in public. We are strangers. Keep space and act like we don't exist. If they break this, they will get a follow-up letter up to and including a protection order. The letter was quite long. Our lawyer looked it over and my wife and I signed it. Then he signed it as well as it being notarized, and then we made legal copies for all of our records. My lawyer went with a private delivery service and hand-delivered it to him with a signature of received goods, plus video evidence as well. So far so good on that end. I'm now focused on my wife and soon-to-be child. I hope I'm ready. I know how not to be a father, so there is that. Thanks all for your input. Is there anything else I should do or think of to protect my family? Update 2. Hello, it has been a while. Some people wanted updates. In the weeks leading up to my wife giving birth, things were stressful. I ended up having my first panic attack. That was not fun. My wife helped me through that one. Bill tried to apologize and get back with my SIL but effed that up by trying to explain himself again on how he was in the right by reconnecting my parents and my family. After that, their divorce has been moving quickly. My wife giving birth was an amazing experience for me. The moment I held my child for the first time amazed me. How can I love something so tiny and who I just met so much, so quickly? Both baby and my wife are doing really well. My wife started saying she feels like a cow. I'm not sure how to make her stop, but she keeps randomly mooing at me. My dad and his wife tried to show up at the hospital. Still not sure how they found us or knew where we were, but staff blocked them and covered for us like a bunch. If you said we would start running into them randomly around town, mainly grocery/shopping stores, even if I drove out of my way, we would sometimes bump into one or both of them. Law enforcement still says as they are not doing anything against the law and don't seem dangerous/malicious. We did our best to ignore them or stay home or have a family member get the items. My therapist has sure earned her paycheck the last few months. My lawyer is trying their best, but the laws I feel are against us. Innocent until proven guilty, or in this case, nothing is dangerous until after it is, or hurry up and wait until something bad happens, then we might do something. It is super frustrating. We moved now. I never want to do that again. Good family helps, but with a newborn and crazy people around, it was stressful. I know it doesn't sound possible, and I'm still in disbelief, but my in-laws are amazing and got us in contact with a friend of theirs. Long story short, these friends wanted to downsize since all of their kids moved out, told in-laws and brought them over. We ended up coming up with a really good deal. Our new home is bigger, on more land, but needs a lot of work still. Baby-friendly. It is old and outdated, but we have been making it ours. We are not rich by any stretch of the imagination. We have a good network around us. I'm also doing 99% of the work to the house myself. Sael moved in and helped us make it possible. Since moving, we had not seen my dad or his wife. That was until about 2 weeks ago. I was going to update and did write all of the above. Then since my lawyer contacted me saying my dad reached out and wanted to talk, I tried to say hard pass, but they advised me by saying, I think it would be in your best interest. We set up a date and time in public 3 days later at a coffee shop. We met up. Even though we were early, they were waiting for us. It was just my wife and I, also a paralegal from my lawyer's office undercover. I could see the disappointment in their eyes that our child did not come with us. It started awkward AF. They started some BS small talk, but I just said, "What do you want?" "Well, my dad's health is not well and is going downhill steadily. May have 2-ish years at most." They showed scans, doctor's notes, tests, and other items to prove it. I was quiet the entire time they talked, and all I could think about is, that sucks for him. It was like getting news that someone you knew of when you were a child died, or a sick neighbor or an old babysitter. For me, no real emotion or feelings because I feel like I didn't have a real connection with them. My wife knew I was irritated and tried to silently calm me down. When they were done, I said something to the effect of, "I'm sorry this happened to you. I hope you get better." Then I got up to walk out. His wife opened her mouth and said something like, "That's it? That all you have to say? You owe it to him too." I didn't let her finish and went off on them. I said everything that I had been saying in my head for years, a practiced monologue I started when I was a teen. Highlights include, but are not limited to, how he owed me more than anything, how he ruined any type of relationship the moment he started thinking with his dick when he tried to erase my real and only mom, neglect, abuse, overpunishment, the works. Then I finished with, my real mother died when I was 14. Pretend I did as well, because that is when my dad, became dead to me. Now looking back, I find it in a way funny that my 5 feet 4 inches wife was holding back a 6 feet 2 inches, 200 plus guy. but they kind of looked like fish opening and closing their mouth. My wife then escorted me away. When we got the car, I had my second panic attack. But since things have been quiet but still fresh, I'm struggling but working through it. When my wife notices me zoning, she just hands me our child, and things get better. So sorry for the long read. If you are still here, I hope you all have a wonderful day and may your life be blessed. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Dad always favored my cousin, treated me and my brothers like second-class citizens, but it turns out she was his secret love child and had a secret college fund saved for her from the time I was little. There was always this tension in our family, mostly about my cousin Sarah. My name is Emily, and I'm the baby of the family. I have 2 older brothers, Mark and David, who are twins. The 3 of us always felt like our dad, Robert, cared more about Sarah than he did about us. It sounds childish, maybe, but it's hard growing up feeling second best, especially when the person you're being compared to isn't particularly special. Sarah is a year younger than me, and she's the only child of my Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa. Of course, they love her very much, which is perfectly normal. The problem was how much my dad, Robert, seemed to adore Sarah. He'd buy her anything she wanted, pay her tons of attention, and it always felt like he put her needs before ours. It made Mark, David, and me feel like we weren't important to him. Since we were little kids, Sarah and I started attending the school in the same year. This was something that was pushed on us by both my uncle and my dad. They would always encourage us to spend as much time together. It felt unnatural. Every morning, Dad would make me get up super early. We'd drive all the way to Uncle Tom's house to pick up Sarah, and then Dad would take us both to school. It made no sense to me why couldn't she just ride the school bus like other kids. If it was just me, I could have slept in longer, but every time I'd ask Dad about it, he'd tell me to stop being so difficult and that I should think of Sarah as my sister. It made me feel like my feelings weren't important, that I was just supposed to go along with whatever he wanted. At school, Sarah always wanted me to play with her, to be with her all the time. She was a quiet kid, didn't have a lot of friends. Me, I had my own friends, and I liked spending time with them. Sarah didn't like that. After school, when Dad picked us up, she'd always tell on me if I hadn't spent lunch with her. Dad would get mad at me, say I should be nicer to my little sister. I'd just roll my eyes. It really bothered me how much he seemed to favor her over his own kids. My Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa never seemed to see anything wrong with any of this. My dad and Uncle Tom have always been close. They're only a couple of years apart, grew up doing everything together. Uncle Tom was the older one, so he taught Dad a lot of things, how to ride a bike, how to shave, how to fix things on the car. Their own dad wasn't around much, so they really relied on each other. That's why they always wanted our families to be together all the time. At first, my brothers told me that Mom never really liked spending so much time with Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa, but she didn't have much of a choice. They were always coming over to our house. When Mom tried to talk to Dad about it, he'd just brush her off. He'd say family should be close and he liked being with his brother. Mom didn't mind Dad spending time with Uncle Tom, but she felt like she had to be friendly with Aunt Lisa too since she was always there. I think some people just don't connect, and that's how it was with Mom and Aunt Lisa. Mom thought Aunt Lisa was too loud, talked too much, and seemed to flirt a lot with other men. This was understandable, as Aunt Lisa and my Uncle Tom back then had a different kind of marriage where each one of them could freely flirt and have relations with anyone. My aunt would tell my mother the details of her encounters. This made my mother very uncomfortable. She always told us that it was inappropriate to have such talks around kids. My brothers told me that is why whenever my aunt and uncle would visit, she would make them go outside and play with other kids. Dad never seemed to have a problem with my uncle and aunt's marriage. He would laugh hearing stories about their encounters. The year Mom was pregnant with me, Lisa told her she wanted to have a baby too, but she and Uncle Tom had been having trouble. The doctors said they might not be able to have children. This made them very sad, and they argued a lot. That's when they decided to have that different kind of marriage where they could see other people but still stay together. But Lisa told Mom she still really wanted a baby. Mom told her to think about other options like adopting or trying special treatments. Those things cost a lot of money, but Mom said if they really wanted a family, they could find a way. When I was born, there were problems. Mom died from losing too much blood. My brothers told me how hard it was. They were sad about Mom but happy I was born healthy like Mom would have wanted. But Dad was heartbroken. He wouldn't leave Mom's side. He couldn't believe she was gone. I can't even imagine how much that hurt him, but he never blamed me, not once. I wish Mom was here. I miss her even though I never met her. My brothers have all these stories about her, and I only have pictures. The first year after I was born was tough for Dad and my brothers. They weren't used to taking care of a baby girl, but Dad stepped up, and my brothers helped him. Those 3 men have always been there for me no matter what. I don't remember my brothers ever fighting with me when I was growing up. They'd take me everywhere with them. I was like their little buddy. They'd let me watch them play video games, sitting right next to them. They never argued with me about food. I always got the biggest piece of pizza if I wanted it. I always got to use the bathroom first because they knew sometimes girls need it more. I know some brothers can be mean, but mine are really sweet. They treat me like I'm special. My friends would tell me stories about fighting with their siblings, but I never had that. My brothers are calm. They don't get angry easily. The biggest argument we ever had was about what movie to watch, and we just voted to decide. We've always gotten along, and I feel lucky to have such good, kind brothers. After Mom died, Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa were around a lot. Luckily, Aunt Lisa got pregnant just a year after I was born. Everyone was happy about it because they knew how much Aunt Lisa and Uncle Tom had wanted a baby. When Sarah was born, we spent a lot of time together. We were close in age, and Dad and Uncle Tom wanted us to be friends. At first, it was okay, but when you're forced to be with someone all the time, it gets old fast. When I started school, I made my own friends, and I didn't want to spend every minute with Sarah, but Dad and Uncle Tom expected me to always be there for her, to watch out for her. Sarah was a bit of a crier, and she could be very dramatic. She didn't have any brothers or sisters, so she didn't know how to share. She was always very protective of her stuff. Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa never really told her to stop, so she acted that way at school too. She'd argue with anyone who tried to borrow a pencil. If she had a disagreement with a classmate, she'd throw herself on the floor and have a fit. Kids don't like that, so they stopped playing with her or they just stay away from her. When she'd complain to her parents, they'd blame the teacher or the other kids instead of saying anything to Sarah about how she was acting. Because I had to spend so much time with Sarah, I started to lose my temper with her. She wasn't easy to be around. If she wanted to watch a certain TV show, that's what we had to watch, even if I didn't like it. If she wanted to eat at a certain restaurant, I had to agree even if I didn't want to, or she'd have a tantrum. One time, I was going to a birthday party, but the invite was only to me. My aunt cornered me and my dad that day. She wanted me to take Sarah along with me. She said I was very selfish for not wanting to take my cousin with me. I was starting to argue with my dad a lot because I was tired of always being around her. Sarah also had this annoying habit of flirting with the guys I liked. If she saw me talking to a boy, she'd come up and introduce herself as my sister, saying how close we were. Then she'd tell these embarrassing stories about me from when I was little, like they were funny. One time I had a crush on a boy named Ethan. We were starting to get close, talking a lot after school. One day, Sarah saw us together and marched right over. "Hi, I'm Sarah, Emily's sister," she announced, putting her arm around me in a way that felt totally fake. Then she started telling Ethan about the time I accidentally wore my pajamas to school because I was so sleepy. Ethan looked uncomfortable, and I was mortified. I glared at Sarah, and she just smirked back at me like she'd won some kind of game. I walked away from her, from all of this. When my brother finished high school, they knew Dad didn't have a lot of money saved for college, so they both worked really hard to get scholarships. They still had to take out loans to pay for everything. I knew I had to do the same thing. I had to get good grades and get into a good school. So the last 2 years of high school, I didn't hang out with my friends as much. I studied a lot. Sarah would text me, call me, wanting to hang out. I'd ignore her. She'd tell me I was wasting my time, that people our age should be having fun. She kept telling me to have fun and live a little. One time, she even showed up at the library while I was studying, demanding that I leave with her to go to a party. I told her firmly that I had to study and that she needed to respect my priorities. She rolled her eyes and called me a goody two-shoes, storming off in a huff. I just sighed and went back to my books, feeling a mix of annoyance and a tiny bit of guilt, though I knew I was doing what I needed to do. When I graduated, I got accepted to 2 really good universities. I had to choose one. One of the universities was in the same city where Sarah was going to school. My family expected me to pick that one. Sarah was so excited. She kept talking about how we'd get an apartment together, go to classes together, have so much fun. It made me cringe. I liked Sarah, but I didn't want to spend all of college stuck with her. So I chose the other university, the one farther away. I didn't even talk to Dad about it. I had a scholarship and I was the one taking out the loan, so it was my decision. When Dad found out, he was angry. He tried to make me change my mind. I told him it was my life, my choice. He said he was disappointed that I was choosing another school just because I didn't want to be with Sarah. He said having a sibling like Sarah was a great thing. That made me mad. I told him I did have siblings, my brothers, and I love spending time with them. I told him to stop trying to force me to be with Sarah, that I was an adult now, and I needed to make my own decisions. Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa were mad too. They called me, saying how much Sarah had been looking forward to living with me, how it would have made college so much better for her. But I didn't care. I was happy with my choice. The day I was packing my boxes, getting ready to move into the dorm, I heard Aunt Lisa's car pull up. It wasn't unusual. Since my brothers moved out, she'd sometimes come over to see Dad or cook for us. Usually, I'd try to be out of the house when she was there, but this time I was home. I locked myself in my room and stayed quiet, hoping Dad would think I was asleep and wouldn't call me down. I could hear them talking and laughing. I got curious, so I peeked out of my room like any kid would and tried to hear what they were saying. That's when I heard Dad say something about a college fund. That got my attention. I crept downstairs, trying to hear better. I heard Dad tell Aunt Lisa that he'd been saving money for Sarah's college for a long time. He said Sarah would never have to take out a loan, that he had it all taken care of. I just stood there shocked. What was he talking about? Dad had never said anything about a college fund to me or my brothers. Why would he do that for Sarah? I felt so hurt. Why would Dad do that for Sarah's school and not even talk to me about it, not even think about how I was going to pay for college? I went back upstairs and called my brothers. I asked them if they knew anything about this. They were just as shocked as I was. They asked me if I was sure about what I heard. I told them I was. The 3 of us tried to figure out why Dad would do that, but we couldn't. Then something just clicked in my head. I knew I could say anything to my brothers, so I just asked, Do you think Sarah is Dad's daughter? My brothers were quiet. Then David said it was impossible, but Mark was quiet for a longer time. When David asked him what he thought, Mark said he'd wondered about it before too. He said there was no other reason why Dad would be so close to his brother's daughter. Mark said Sarah looked a little like us with our dark brown hair from Dad, not like Uncle Tom's blonde hair. I know that can just happen with genes, but we knew there was something about how Dad acted with Sarah that had always confused us. I decided I was going to find out the truth. My brothers asked me how. I told them I was going to get some of Sarah's hair secretly and get a DNA test. We had to know. If she wasn't Dad's daughter, then fine, we were wrong. But if she was, then we needed to know. Mark and David didn't really want to, but they agreed. They told me to be careful so no one else would find out. That week, I asked Sarah to hang out. I got some of her hair that had fallen on her jacket without her knowing. I felt bad, like I was doing something wrong, but I had to know the truth. Waiting for the DNA test was awful. I kept hoping I was wrong because I didn't know what I'd do if Sarah was my sister. The day finally came. I got the DNA test results. It said Sarah was my sister. We had the same father. Felt like the world was spinning. I was confused, angry, sad, all at the same time. I couldn't believe Dad had kept this a secret from us for so long. Knowing Sarah was my half-sister, not my cousin, changed everything. It was too much to take in. I needed time to think. I felt like Dad had lied to us, and I was mad at myself for not realizing it sooner. It was obvious him and my aunt spent way too much alone time together. It was uncomfortable to think that Sarah was born just a year after me. That meant Dad had been with his brother's wife within a year of Mom dying. Thinking about it made me feel sick. Everything made sense now. Why Dad always made me hang out with Sarah, even when I needed space. I called my brothers crying. They knew right away something was wrong. I told them Sarah was our half-sister. They were silent for a few minutes. I sent them pictures of the DNA test so they could see. Mark and David were furious. They wanted to come home right away to confront Dad, to find out what happened. But I knew confronting Dad about this wouldn't change anything. He had slept with his brother's wife, and she had gotten pregnant. That was the truth. Nothing we could say would change that. Instead, I said we should stop talking to him. Dad had done nothing for us. He let us figure out how to pay for college, taking out loans, while he saved money for the baby he had with another woman. Mark agreed with me. David was still in shock. Now that we knew the secret, I decided we could at least do something to reveal the truth. I made a plan to tell Sarah in a way that was quiet but that Dad couldn't ignore. I asked my brothers not to tell Dad anything yet. I asked them to come on the day I was moving to college to drive me because I didn't want to go with Dad. They agreed right away. So on the day I was leaving for college, I asked Sarah to come over and say goodbye. When she got there, Dad was acting all happy and excited like he always did around her. He gave her a big hug. Sarah was telling me about her plans to move into an apartment and how her mom had just told her about this college fund that had been secretly set up for her years ago. I just scoffed inside and rolled my eyes in my head, knowing exactly where that money really came from. Sarah was going on and on about how great it was, how her mom had saved thousands of dollars so she wouldn't have to worry about loans like I did. I bit my tongue, trying not to say anything. My brothers showed up when Mark and David pulled into the driveway. They didn't even say hello to Dad properly. You could feel the tension. Dad tried to talk to them, but they gave him the cold shoulder. This was different for us. We'd always been respectful to Dad, but after finding out this secret, we couldn't even look at him the same way. My brothers ignored him basically while they packed my stuff into the car. I helped them a little. Once everything was loaded, I turned to say goodbye to Dad. He reached out to hug me, but I took a step back so he couldn't. He stopped, looking hurt. He asked if something was wrong, and that's when I looked him right in the eye and said, "I wish Mom was here." He looked confused and hurt, but I didn't care. After the kind of secret he'd hidden from us, I wanted to yell at him, to scream, but I held it in. I hugged Sarah goodbye, and I slipped her an envelope. I told her to open it in front of Dad after I drove away. She nodded like she understood and said goodbye. As we drove away, I knew this was going to cause a huge problem in our family, but the truth had to come out. Sarah needed to know the truth about her mom and our dad. As a backup plan, I also sent a picture of the DNA results to Uncle Tom. I didn't want him to be in the dark just like us. As I expected, within half an hour, my phone started ringing constantly. My brothers were getting calls too, from Aunt Lisa and Dad. They were obviously trying to call us to explain, but they never picked up. Then Uncle Tom called. I decided to answer because I knew how shocked he must be. He asked me straight up if the test was fake. I felt this wave of emotion, and I told him I wished it was fake. I told him how much this news had hurt me and my brothers, how it changed everything we thought about our dad. Uncle Tom took a deep breath, and then he asked me if I was okay. I could hear in his voice that he was really worried, and that's when I started crying. Uncle Tom had always been important to us, and I hated being the one to tell him this bad news, but even though he was hurting too, he was still kind, asking me how I was doing. Uncle Tom comforted me. He told me I hadn't done anything wrong. He thanked me for telling him the truth. Now that I'm in college and my brothers are gone, I've had time to think about how much this has changed our family. Feels like I did something wrong. I'm scared about what's going to happen to us. Am I the bad guy for telling my cousin the truth? Did I do the right thing? Update 1. Everything has been turned upside down since the truth came out. It's been complete chaos in my family. I learned that Sarah and Uncle Tom moved out of their house very quickly. They don't want anything to do with Aunt Lisa now. Aunt Lisa's reaction has been awful. She's been sending me text messages one after another. Some of them are really mean, accusing me of all sorts of things. Others try to make it seem like her sleeping with my dad was somehow okay. She even said in one message that I was the one who broke up her marriage, that I am responsible. She wrote that my mom would be disappointed in me, that I was trying to hurt everyone and tear the family apart. As for my dad, Robert, he hasn't said a word. Complete silence since that day. He hasn't called, hasn't texted. That's fine with me. I know there's nothing he could say that would make me forgive him. Thank you to everyone who has said anything. I appreciate it. I know deep down that telling the truth was the right thing to do, but I still feel incredibly guilty. I never wanted to cause so much pain in my family, but the truth had to come out sometime, no matter how much it hurt. Update 2. Many of you have suggested that I should call Sarah and apologize. I've decided not to do that. Honestly, I will never think of Sarah as my half-sister, even though it's obvious that my dad had a relationship with her mom. She'll always just be my cousin. That doesn't mean I dislike her. I don't. I was just always made to look after her, to play with her, and maybe that made me a little resentful. But I truly hope she's happy and that she can get past all of this. Also, some of you have different opinions about why I stopped talking to my dad, Robert. Some of you want me to listen to his side of things. But why would I? Imagine if your parents slept with their brother or sister's husband or wife and had a child, and then they kept it a secret for years, making you be friends with your cousin just so they could see the child without anyone knowing. Would you be all right with that? Because I'm not. I've thought about this a great deal, and I can't forgive that kind of betrayal. Update 3. I wanted to share what's been happening with my family. Uncle Tom and Sarah came to see me at college. I was pretty nervous about meeting them, but as soon as Uncle Tom saw me, he gave me a warm hug, which made me feel a little better. Sarah and I said hello politely, but it was a bit awkward. We sat down to talk, and Uncle Tom told me that he'd stopped all contact with my dad since that day. It was sad to hear, but I wasn't surprised considering the affair my dad had with his wife. The conversation was difficult, but it also felt like a kind of ending, knowing that Uncle Tom had made a decision for himself. Uncle Tom then told me he was going to be divorcing Aunt Lisa. He asked if she had contacted me. I showed him some of the messages she'd been sending. He got very angry. He took pictures of those messages and said that he and his lawyer would handle it. I was surprised he already had a divorce lawyer. Uncle Tom explained that he couldn't stay with her after she had betrayed him like that. I nodded. I understood how he felt. Sarah then asked how I was doing in college. I told her I was doing okay. She asked if I already knew that the college fund her mother talked about had actually been set up by my dad for her. I nodded and told her that I had heard the conversation that evening her mother had come over alone to talk to my dad. That's what made me suspicious about them in the first place. Sarah then told me that she had given all of that money back to my dad and had asked him to never contact her again. She said she thought their whole affair was incredibly strange and unsettling, and she couldn't accept anyone else as her father. I told Sarah that she did the right thing, especially since my dad hadn't even admitted he was wrong. Even now, Uncle Tom made a face, clearly still furious, and told me how the night he found out everything, he had driven to my dad's house ready to hit him, but Sarah stopped him, and because he loved her so much, he didn't do it. Otherwise, he said my dad would be dead. I understood how frustrating it must have been for him to have raised his daughter for so long only to find out that his brother was the one who did it with his wife. What my father had done was the worst kind of betrayal between brothers. After talking with Sarah and Uncle Tom, I feel much better about my decision to stop talking to my dad. As for my brothers and me, we're doing fine. The three of us are family, and we always be there for each other. I talk to them regularly, and we're planning on getting jobs in the same city later on so we can all live together. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Sister ruined our honeymoon cruise by making me babysit and humiliating me in public. When I asked for an apology, she turned my whole family turned against us. Hi, sorry if this is too long, my life is spiraling, and as a longtime viewer, I would really like all of your takes. Throwaway account as my family uses media. Fake names used so my full family involved. I, 37 male, husband, 36 male, sister Amber, 45 female, her partner Tim, 47 male, brother, 42 male, mom, 66 female, Cassie special needs, 67 female semi-verbal. Import information. My mom, sister, and I are in the care field. My mom is a retired care worker for over 25 years, my sister 2 years in care field, and I 11 years in Carefield. At any time, Cassie has to be with either my mom, sister, or I, as she is not independent. This was my mom, sister, and Cassie's third cruise. This was everyone else's first ever cruise. My husband and I were married this year, 2024, on our 11th year. My mom has been talking for years about having her immediate family on one big family cruise on her retirement year. This year she retired. She informed my husband and I that she would pay for our portion as well as a balcony suite as a honeymoon present. She told us that though this is a family cruise, we are to treat it like a honeymoon and relax and enjoy and not to stress, also to have lots of time to ourselves. We were both worried as it was a lot of money, plus mixing a honeymoon with a family cruise seemed daunting. We weren't sure how to juggle everything, but my mom told us not to worry. We convinced her to allow us to pay for any extra expenses like drinks, items bought on and off cruise. She agreed. We both thanked her profusely and showed how grateful we were throughout the trip. Unfortunately, our honeymoon/family cruise ended up being an emotional disaster. Though my husband and I had times we were happy and did our best to overcome the overwhelming stress, there was a lot of bullying and temper tantrums from my sister that were unnecessary and uncalled for, directed towards me mostly and sometimes at everyone else. Though my sister has always been high-strung and over-opinionated about most situations, she has also been one of my husband and my biggest supporters, which we value highly. Just by being gay, my husband lost his entire family for his choice, so any love and support is something we value highly. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. We love my sister, but her treatment towards us was not okay. Before the cruise, my siblings, husband, and Tim met up. The cruise topic came up, and we all agreed that giving our mom one day to herself to enjoy the cruise without having to take care of Cassie would be a nice thank you to her. My mom was also paying for most of my sister's and Tim's expenses and all brothers' expenses as well. This was her choice. We talked about how either Amber and Tim or husband and me would take Cassie for the first half of the day and then we would switch. Since both my sister and I are in the care field, it only made sense to not have us together. It was a discussion, not a set-in-stone plan. However, on the cruise, it quickly became clear that my brother and Tim got a free pass not to look after Cassie, and the one day of taking Cassie turned into 4 days of care lasting between 3 to 5 hours on our downtime each time. This was never agreed upon, never discussed, never brought up to me or my husband. The 3 occasions that Cassie was put into my care were out of nowhere. Though I accepted all 3 times as to not cause a scene, and of course I wanted my mom to relax, all 3 times my sister and mom would go to the spa to spend time together. The 4th time my husband and I looked after Cassie just as so my mom could enjoy around 4 hours by herself alone because she needed a break. This time it was our choice as she looked so stressed she enjoyed the solo time alone. I love Cassie. She's family, but she's also work. She needs a lot of help to do most things. My husband did his best to help out, but I was the primary care. I was happy, Cassie was happy, but the 3 times I was given the task was by Amber, not my mom. Each time my husband and I had to cancel our plans together. There were one-time events and couple activities on the cruise we wanted to experience and weren't given a choice. It was our turn to take her, and we did. No matter what I did, I always managed to do something wrong. No matter how hard I tried to follow Amber's instructions, I always missed something. She never stopped reminding me how lucky it was that Mom was spending so much money on my husband and I, how grateful we should be. Each time we went to buy a special drink, she would remind us it cost extra money. Each time we discussed buying pictures or merchandise, she reminded us not to abuse our mom's kindness. One day she would encourage talking to our mom about purchasing something, the next day telling me I'm being selfish and not thinking about Mom when all I did was retell what she said to me the previous day. On many occasions during dinner in the crowded dining hall, she would either slow her speech to talk to me like a child or try and teach me how to do things properly so I don't screw up next time. There was even a time she handed signature photo album book for our wait staff to sign for Cassie. I was very overwhelmed and had an anxiety attack and kind of blanked. Amber was yelling instructions at me where she could have easily done what she wanted herself. Then after continued to berate me in front of over 40 people. I was utterly humiliated. She said she couldn't fathom how I couldn't understand the simplest of instructions. I have never in all my life been so torn down by her. She treated me so poorly. I was up most nights sick. I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I wanted to enjoy myself but felt like I was in a nightmare. My husband was furious. I asked my mom if she knew what was going on. She said yes but wouldn't tell us. I said I'd go talk to Amber. My mom begged me not to, that Amber would come tell me what was going on her own. Well, she never did. With each passing day, she got more and more unbearable to be around. She got meaner and meaner, even publicly accusing me of forcing our mom to do our laundry when I was just asking how the machine worked. Out of the 7-day cruise, my husband and I only got 8 hours together alone to enjoy our honeymoon. Everything else was either spent with someone, with the family mostly catering to Cassie or Amber, going on group excursions which most were fun, and wandering the ship with family again. I love my family, but I will never ever travel with my sister again. I've never ever treated her the way she treated me. I honestly felt like she hated me. After the cruise, I sent her a letter explaining how hurt I was, how I felt like her own personal gopher and punching bag, how I felt so disrespected and used. She in turn wrote me a novel explaining her finances, my mother's finances, and listing the many reasons why she was acting the way she was acting to try and excuse her behavior towards me. She then wrote an apology, or at least my mom who read the letter said it was a good apology and to drop the situation and move on. This is a copy-paste from her apology. I'm not trying to pretend I'm some saint here. I should have realized how frustrated I was getting and asked you guys why you were making things so hard, and instead I assumed that you were being difficult for no reason and let my frustration build until my fuse turned into a switch. I lost my cool a lot and I know how I get when that happens. It's not nice at all and I am genuinely sorry for that. Then directly followed by this. In hindsight, I also should have been a lot more explicit that the whole spa thing was about mom getting a break. Not me wanting to monopolize her time, instead of assuming you would realize that on your own, and I could have made up a little calendar or something so we could all get on the same page of about when it would happen, assuming you were willing, rather than hoping you'd be able to figure it out without me having to pester you every day. If nothing else, that would have given the two of you a chance to let me know that this never was a family cruise to you, and that there was no way you were going to give up an hour of your honeymoon every day, even as a thank you to mom for paying for the whole thing, and then I could have figured out a plan B that wouldn't have required a single thing from either of you. Again, I love my sister, I love my family, but the reactions have been terrible. My mom has pretty much sided with my sister, radio silent to my husband. They used to talk every day, saying I crushed Amber by calling her out. If it was my intention to hurt Amber, I succeeded even though she told me she agreed Amber was in the wrong. I should have just let it go, that she doesn't want to die knowing I broke the family. My brother wants nothing to do with it and has dropped communication except one conversation, also taking her side, saying her silence was better than me raising a stink, saying he would hate to have his health fail and have him die knowing the family was in shambles. Her partner Tim, silence. Amber completely silence after issuing me an ultimatum. Unless I can prove to her that I'm not a selfish, ungrateful, gaslighting liar, then she's done with our relationship. Preferred outcome: to have my family back. Realistic outcome: maybe I can get them to agree to family counseling to repair what little is left of our relationship, but in all honesty it looks pretty grim. I don't want to sound dramatic, but my heart literally hurts every day. I wanted to give my husband an actual family that would love him for him. I felt with all my heart it would be my family, but they all proved that's not going to happen. Dropping it and forgiving her mistreatment would only result in me resenting my family. I don't want to lose them, but feel so abused by them. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. So, AA for asking my sister for a proper apology? Or is it even worth it at this point? I honestly would take any advice because both my husband and I are at a total loss. Thank you. Additional information from OOP to clarify the relationship with Cassie. OP. So Cassie is not related to my family. She came into my mother's care while I still lived with my parents 11 years ago. She was experiencing daily seizures at that time, so was only able to have her initially because both she and I were caseworkers. I would look after Cassie at night when she had nighttime seizures and mom Cassie in the morning. Amber has not lived with the family since she was 18, so she never had to deal with the level of care Cassie needed to the amount we both have. She was a regular drop-in and spend time with family member but always got to go back home. Cassie has never been in Amber's care solo for any good length of time, normally for little outings and such. If she visits my mom, she will stay at the house with Cassie, while my mom runs errands or distract Cassie if my mom is feeling overwhelmed. Nowadays this is what the family will do as well while visiting mom. But it's not an Amber-only thing. She's not the only one who helps out with Cassie when around her. We all do our best to lighten the load for mom. She's getting older and has expressed how tired she is, and that she doesn't know how much longer she can care for Cassie. Cassie can do no wrong as Amber's eyes. However, Cassie is capable of being very self-absorbed and unaware of those around her, and how she's making others feel. It's tricky as she won't exactly understand if you tell her, so you have to do the kind approach. But be damned you voice your concern or frustration in front of Amber. As for long-term, it is as follows. Future mom passes or mom incapable of taking care of Cassie. Cassie goes back into the system and lives with another family. No matter what Amber says, she cannot take on Cassie. She is way too much work. Her partner wouldn't be able to handle the stress as he suffers from an illness which zaps his energy daily. Cassie needs constant attention and observation, though her seizures are now almost non-existent. She can fall easily and hurt herself. My husband and I agreed that we won't be taking Cassie. It's not fair for me to ask him to. I of course could become an in-home caretaker to Cassie. It would be full-time, but husband is not a care worker. He loves Cassie as she's family, but to ask him to co-take care of Cassie is a lot. Brother looking after Cassie is a no. If Cassie goes back into the system, because we do not count as immediate family even though she's lived with my mom for over a decade, nobody would be permitted to visit her, maybe my mom because she lived with her, but the likelihood of Cassie just being removed from our lives is likely approaching. Approaching the topic with my mom, especially Amber, tends to go poorly and is an avoided topic. Update January 23, 2025. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of that community for reaching out and giving me their honest opinions. It's really helped me to look past my love for my family and accept the hard reality that I believe I was avoiding. Now for the update. When I wrote my first post, I was not in a place where I was able to remove myself fully from my mom. Reason being is this. Right off the cruise, after I sent my sister Amber the letter explaining how she hurt me on my honeymoon, my mom was working on my husband and I to let a family friend do our taxes. This was when she was still talking to my husband and telling us she agreed my sister was wrong in her actions. We have been going to a company for years, but she was extremely convincing, saying her friend had 15 years accounting experience. Her friend also said this. We accepted as she asked us to trust her, and that trust bit us in the ass hard. This was back in August of 2024. Next thing we know, the family friend screwed up on our taxes so bad we are now owing a large sum of money back to the government, double digits. We found this out unexpectedly in December 2024, and our world was immediately flipped upside down. But in a way, I guess as bad as our financial situation is, it's come with a lot of clarity. FYI, with my husband's adoptive mom's help/experience, we have managed to hopefully be okay somewhat. We can fix it in a couple of years, maybe 5 or 6, which is something. Unfortunately, our great credit we have been working on for over 9 years has been destroyed, which is devastating. My mom refused to help in any way, not even offering to help us find resources or solutions, telling me that it was our fault for not doing our taxes in the first place. It was hard not to blame her for getting us to trust her friend. My husband and I are adults and we made the choice to put our trust in her. We own that choice. Still sucks though. Nobody sending happy birthdays on my birthday or happy holidays for Christmas, which was something never forgotten. But this year was missed because of this. On top of everything else, my husband and I decided to go no contact and did so with all family members, e.g. Amber, Tim, Amber's partner, mom, and brother, a space we felt was for the best. We didn't know how long, but we knew for our health it was best. Now comes January 2025 when things took an even more bizarre and brutal turn. Suddenly on our social media accounts a poster left comments exposing our financial situation. It was so accurate that we knew who it came from, as the only people who knew were my husband and I, my mom, and her friend who did our taxes. I sent screenshots to my mom asking if she knew anything about it. She denied having any involvement. We blocked the account, and within an hour Tim reached out through Facebook. I forgot to block him, and he said that nobody knew he was sending me this message and he was checking up on me, and that he and the family didn't know how to act on how my husband and I were acting. Right away we looked at the posts, the account that we blocked, and put 2 and 2 together. The account that posted the private financial information was Tim. I again reached out to my mom, but this time by phone, said for her to tell me the truth about the post. She began to cry and said that she told Amber all our financial information because she just needed to talk to someone about it. I informed her that she broke both my husband and my trust by doing so. She blatantly lied to me when I asked the first time. We asked her not to tell anyone, and she told my sister, who she knew we were going through problems. We had also discovered that my mom also told her best friend and Amber all of my and my husband's private medical information, which shortly after Amber created another account and began to slander us online with this information going across all our media sites we use and doing the same thing. This was shocking, as my mom never ever divulged financial or medical information to me about my siblings when I've asked in the past, always saying it was not her business, and if I was curious I had to ask them. So why was I and my husband not given the same respect? We were then dealing with this for over 2 weeks, reporting and blocking accounts. It was so incredibly horrible. Again, I sent screenshots to my mom to show her how the information she gave was now being used against us, publicly proving it was Amber and Tim, and yet she stood by them. Over time, through my sister's slander, we learned that my mom, Amber, Tim, and brother had been constantly talking about my husband and we before the wedding, Amber and my mom especially, and not in a positive way. We also found out through my sister's slander of the true feelings towards my husband. They hate him, which broke both our hearts. He's too gay, he's a drug abuser. Clean 9 years. Lazy, dirty, etc. awful things. The family has made it known that they find me unstable, brainwashed, and stupid, and that my husband is a terrible manipulator who's pulling the strings. My mom then began to send pictures of Cassie to my phone, as I had her blocked on all other media. I asked her to stop, as it was a form of guilt-tripping and avoidance in regard to her actions. She got very mad at me trying to guilt me, so I blocked her phone number, which was the last form of contact we had. Now my whole immediate family is fully blocked, and I feel sick to my stomach. We only got married last July, and I feel like my inner family literally died. Crushes me almost daily. I'm doing my best to get by, but my sleep and appetite are heavily affected. I have already been getting mental health help, which has been good. That's a big reason why I block them, and I'm writing this update as it's been recommended to just put it out into the world. I honestly don't know what to do, if it's even possible to have them in my life again. Nasty words were exchanged on both sides. My husband was so attacked by them all that honestly he's emotionally done. I don't blame him. I cannot ask him to allow them back into his life. They were awful to him, which means that making things right feels impossible. We do have a good support group of family and friend we made, though not connected by blood, which we are both blessed and grateful. This does make it a bit better, as we have people to fall back on, thankfully. I have no other updates. Hopefully they can leave us alone. Hopefully we can live in peace and I can learn to get over losing that part of my life. All of that family advice and words have been so eye-opening, and both my husband and I thank you for putting what was wrong to light. You were all right. I'm just so sad that it was all true. I'll keep you posted if anything else happens, but hopefully it doesn't. Small edit, as I keep seeing questions regarding our finances. I had to ask my husband to give a small description, as he is the one dealing directly with it. Mom's friend messed up, and when we inquired she made sure and said to enjoy our money. So we went and paid off all our bills and wedding act. In December we found out we owed, and went into debt consolidation to help us pay off things, as we were en route to bankruptcy. We don't really want to go too much into detail, as this could get legal, but we do have a lot of documents to show Mom's friend belief she knew what she was doing. We don't believe she did it on purpose but made a mistake. She's now retired, so doesn't work for a company. We are still working on the financial side of things, so at the moment we must focus on stabilizing our situation before we can move forward, if that is even an option, or the payment plan for us will take approximately 5 to 6 years due to the large sum of money we spent, with the understanding it was our money to spend. Everyone, even the financial help we received, our shock. The CRA did not catch the mistake right away on their end, but when they did we only got the email in December. However, the interest was built up from when the mistake was made. In Canada, the CRA can be quite brutal. Thankfully, we seem to be doing okay. But that's all I have for now about that. I hope that clears some stuff up. Additional information from Opie regarding the taxes issue. Opie. We were late on our taxes as we got married in July and forgot to do them as we were hyper-focused on the wedding. Canadian taxes are done in March/April every year, so we forgot. We left for 7 days at the start of August. Once back, my mom convinced us to do our taxes with her friend for free. She was worried we would get charged a higher expense by the company we normally went to because we were so late on our taxes. Her friend assured us she would do everything quickly and efficiently. She did it all really fast because neither of us do the actual paperwork and have always paid to have it done. We thought nothing of how fast she managed to complete our taxes. The amount of dollar was in large amount. We were told everything was done right and not to worry that the money was ours to spend, so we did. It was not the amount owing. The most we would have had to spend was $200 to $300 due to late fees. But right after a very expensive wedding in cruise, she convinced us that free help would be better. We agreed as my husband and I were pretty broke. I never said anything about credit cards, just that because of this massive error our high credit score was destroyed. We were into 700 plus, it took years to build it so high. We managed to not go bankrupt, but in the process our credit suffered because we spent the money which ended up being not ours due to the error. We now have to pay it all back, including the interest. The money we would have gotten from our taxes has been absorbed, but it wasn't a large amount. Nobody knows why the CRA didn't catch this error, as it was a large one. Normally they are good at catching things like this. Unfortunately, it slipped by, and I guess it was noticed closer to December. The email we received was sent in December, though the taxes and money were received in August. To explain in greater detail, which we have been advised not to do, like actually giving you the amounts and the full process, it would be easier to explain. Hope this helps. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Parents sided with my ex-husband and cut me off for years, but then they suddenly wanted to reconnect. When I refused, they showed up at my stepdaughter's school. Hi, I'm a bit torn and I'm hoping you all can help me figure this out. I, 32F, am struggling to figure out what to do about my parents. 60s. They're trying to reconnect with me, but it's kind of complicated and I need help figuring out how to approach this whole thing. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about them and my relationship with them first. Growing up, my parents were always hard on me. No matter what I did, it was never good enough. If I got an A, they wanted to know why it wasn't an A+. If I picked a hobby, they'd nitpick about how it wasn't useful enough. Their attitude wasn't outright abusive, but they always found a way to make me feel like I was failing somehow. When I made big decisions, they'd act like I was incapable of thinking for myself, and they'd do everything they could to meddle with my life. And that's where things really blew up later on. When I was 23, I married my ex-husband, Jake. Jake and I were high school sweethearts, so we figured we'd get married once we were done with college and things settled down a little. For the first time ever, my parents seemed to like my choice of a partner. In hindsight, I think they probably liked him because he came from a well-off family and seemed put together. But things took a turn for the worst for me after I got married to Jake. As soon as we got married, it was like a switch inside Jake got flipped and he became this horrible human being. He became extremely manipulative and controlling. He constantly criticized me, isolated me from friends, and had a very short temper. Things got so bad that I felt like I was walking on eggshells every single day. I know a lot of you are going to ask why I didn't leave him as soon as I saw his behavior start to change. But I want you to know that things weren't that easy for me. I barely had an understanding of what a good relationship looked like. Besides, I was very young and I thought that I was in love. I thought that Jake was going through a rough time and that he had no idea about how to deal with his own emotions, so he was taking it out on me. I know it sounds stupid, but I loved him. I tried my best to convince myself that I just needed to be there more for him. But after years of tolerating his nonsense, I realized I needed to leave him, and no amount of talking or yelling was going to change the way he treated me. It took a while to gather up all the necessary funds, but when I finally decided to escape, I went to my parents for help. I only went to them because I had been open and honest with them about what Jake was like. I started doing that a few months before I was planning to leave Jake because I figured that they'd help me out. Once again, in hindsight, I should have known that they would not have helped me out because every time I told them about something Jake said or did, they would find ways to make me feel bad about it instead of supporting me or even just comforting me. So when I ran to them for help, they got mad at me. They said I was being immature for throwing my marriage away and that I needed to stick it out because getting divorced was very shameful. I think that the worst thing they did to me during that time was tell Jake where I was staying. My plan was to stay with them for 2 weeks while I spoke to Jake about getting a divorce because I knew that Jake would lose his mind and hurt me if I lived with him. I didn't want Jake to know where I was at all, and I figured that if he ever did find out where I was staying, having my parents around would at least stop him from hurting me in any way. But after staying with my parents for only 3 days, they ended up calling Jake to let him know that I was staying with them and that he could come over whenever he wanted so he could talk to me. They thought they were helping me reconcile, but they put me in serious danger. Thankfully, Jake didn't do anything more than just cry and beg me to go back. But after that, I knew I couldn't count on my parents for anything. I left their house and ended up staying with a friend. I barely spoke to them much, but up until then, they still called me regularly to check in on me and to tell me how wrong I was for continuing with the divorce. It took a while, but once the divorce was finalized, I never heard from my parents again. I didn't get a single call or a text or even a holiday card from them. It was like I didn't exist. At first, I was heartbroken. I spent months crying over the fact that my own parents had turned their backs on me. But eventually, I realized I couldn't dwell on it forever because I had much bigger fish to fry. I literally had to rebuild my life from scratch. The next few years were hard, but life-changing. I moved to a new city and started therapy, which helped me heal from both Jake's abuse and my parents' abandonment. I worked my butt off to establish a career in graphic design, which was something I'd always been passionate about. Slowly but surely, things started to look up for me. About 2 years ago, I met Eric, 36M, who's now my husband. He's kind, supportive, and everything Jake wasn't. He has a 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, from a previous relationship, and we've built a beautiful little family together. We got married just a few months ago, and life finally feels stable and happy. And now on to the situation that has brought me here. About a month ago, a local filmmaker released a cautionary documentary about financial and emotional abuse. One of the key case studies in the film was Jake. Now, I obviously did not keep up with what Jake had been up to after our divorce, so I had no idea about why he was even in that documentary. But I watched it and I was horrified. The documentary talked about how he had manipulated several women financially and emotionally, engaged in shady business deals, and even conned people out of thousands of dollars. I knew that Jake was capable of being a huge douchebag and that he was capable of treating his partner wrong, but I never expected his actions to become a cautionary tale for an entire town. I had no idea that he'd gone to such extremes. The filmmaker didn't use his real name, but the details were so specific that anyone who knew Jake could tell it was him. As after the documentary came out, my phone started blowing up. Old friends and acquaintances sent me messages like, "Wow, you dodged a bullet," and "I can't believe you went through that." That was the way I found out about the documentary in the first place. Don't get me wrong. I was glad that Jake's real personality was showcased like that, and that finally I was getting the sympathy I deserved a long time ago. But the biggest shock came when my parents reached out. The first way they reached out was over text. My mom sent me this long, emotional text where she basically apologized for not believing me. She also asked me for a chance to make things right. Then there were the voicemails from my dad where he told me about how sorry he and my mom were for the way they treated me and how they wanted to reconnect. There were more things that they'd said, but essentially they sounded like they really regretted the way they treated me and they sounded desperate to make things right with me again. I just don't know what to feel about this whole thing. I'd be lying if I said that they didn't get to me a little. They're my parents after all. I know that I'm supposed to want to have them back in my life, but at the same time, I can't forget how they treated me when I was at my lowest. I can never forget how they put me in danger just to satisfy their beliefs. Obviously, I haven't responded to any of their attempts to contact me. I can't bring myself to. Instead, I've mostly just sat with my phone in my hand, reading and rereading their messages and feeling a bunch of emotions that I can't quite place my finger on. Part of me feels like I'm justified in ignoring them. They abandoned me when I needed them most, and now they're only reaching out because they're ashamed of how wrong they were. But another part of me feels like I should give them a chance. After all, people can change, right? I've been losing sleep over this. Eric thinks I shouldn't feel bad about cutting them off, but it's not that simple for me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust them again, but I also feel like ignoring them completely might be too harsh. I've come so far since those dark days, and I don't want to let them drag me back into old wounds. but I also don't know if I'd regret not hearing them out. So, AITA for not wanting my parents in my life after everything they did? Or am I being too stubborn and holding on to the past? Update 1. Hi again. Thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. Your perspectives really helped me think things through. Some of you asked questions I realized I didn't address, so I wanted to clear a few things up before diving into what's happened since. First, a lot of you asked why I even considered responding to my parents in the first place. Honestly, it's complicated. I've spent years trying to heal from the abandonment and betrayal, but deep down there's still this part of me that wants to believe that they could change. I guess I was also scared that if I ignored them completely, I'd regret it later. Another question that came up was about Jake and whether my parents knew how bad he was during the marriage. I told them bits and pieces back then, but they never took me seriously. They just assumed I was exaggerating or being dramatic. I only told them the details about Jake's behavior a few weeks before I had planned to run away from him. They didn't take me seriously then either, but I guess I wasn't in the right state of mind to really look into that. I just assumed that since they were my parents, they'd protect me regardless of whether they believed me or not. I was wrong, obviously, but after reading your advice, I decided I couldn't ignore the situation forever. I figured the only way I'd get any peace was to hear my parents out. So I reached out to them and agreed to meet at a neutral spot, a small cafe halfway between their town and mine. I thought they'd be truly sorry for how they treated me and we could have an honest conversation. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. When I met them, they seemed more interested in justifying their behavior than actually apologizing. My mom went on about how they just didn't know that Jake was that bad and how the documentary opened their eyes. My dad said they did what they thought was right at the time and acted like that should be enough to excuse everything. It felt like they were more sorry about being wrong than about the pain they caused me. At one point, my mom even hinted that I could have handled things differently and maybe they wouldn't have misunderstood the situation. That hurt a lot. After everything I went through, they still found a way to blame me, even just a little. I realized then that they weren't really trying to make amends. They were just trying to make themselves feel better. I told them I didn't want to continue the conversation. I said that I was happy with my life as it was and that I wanted things to go back to how they'd been before they reached out, us living separate lives. They looked shocked and tried to argue, but I left before they could talk me into staying. It wasn't an easy decision, but I felt like it was the right one for me and my family. That should have been the end of it, but then they crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Last weekend, Sophie had a school play. It was something she'd been looking forward to for weeks, and Eric and I were so proud of how hard she worked on her part. So you can imagine my surprise when I saw my parents sitting in the audience. I never told them about the play, so they must have gotten the details from Eric's Facebook. Don't worry, we've updated our privacy settings now. They didn't just show up, they acted like they were part of our family. They introduced themselves to other parents as Sophie's grandparents. Sophie was confused and asked Eric who they were. It was such an uncomfortable moment. I had to pull my parents aside and tell them to leave. My mom started crying and said I was punishing them for their past mistakes. My dad said they were just trying to be there for me now, like that somehow justified them ignoring my boundaries. I didn't want to make a scene, especially with other parents and kids around, so I asked them to leave as calmly as I could. They didn't make it easy and they kept trying to cause a scene, but I somehow managed to get them to calm down and leave. After they left, Eric and I were both furious. He's been incredibly supportive through all of this, but he feels like my parents are trying to force their way into our lives in the worst possible way. He was already upset and mad at my parents for mistreating me in the first place and then for choosing to still not take accountability for their actions. He's also protective of Sophie and he's worried about how their behavior might confuse or upset her. He's also worried that they're going to take things too far and maybe start using Sophie to get to me. Obviously, I completely understand where he's coming from. So I sent my parents a firm text afterward telling them their actions were unacceptable and that I needed space. I told them that if they continued to cross boundaries, I'd have no choice but to cut off contact completely. They haven't responded yet, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh, but I also feel like I have every right to protect my family from this kind of chaos. I tried giving them a chance and they proved that they were not ready to respect my boundaries or my life anyway. I'll keep you guys updated on what happens next. Thanks for reading, and I appreciate any advice you have moving forward. Update 2. I really didn't think I'd be back so soon. But here we are. Things have gone completely off the rails and I'm at a loss. A couple of days ago, a family friend reached out to me. This person is someone I've stayed in touch with over the years, but who also keeps in contact with my parents. They called to let me know something they thought I should hear. My parents had apparently tried to contact Jake. Yes, my abusive, controlling, manipulative ex-husband Jake. They tried to contact the same guy whose crimes and predatory behavior were featured in a documentary just a few months ago. According to my friend, my parents reached out to Jake to hear his side of the story about our divorce. I was stunned. After all the apologizing they did, after claiming they believed me now and wanted to make things right, they still felt the need to validate everything by going directly to him. What makes things worse is that apparently Jake didn't respond to them directly, but apparently made some smug, backhanded remarks through mutual acquaintances about how I've always been difficult and quick to blame others. Hearing this felt like someone ripping open an old wound. I didn't want to believe it at first. I thought maybe my friend had misunderstood or had gotten bad information. I tried to give my parents the benefit of the doubt again and reached out to them to confirm. I called my mom and asked her if she and my dad had contacted Jake. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she started defending their decision. She said that they wanted to understand the full picture of what happened in my marriage. She even said something like, "We were wrong before, so we don't want to make that mistake again." I was floored. I was already upset that they'd broken several boundaries while trying to make up to me, but finding out that my parents still did not trust anything that happened to me, even with video evidence of Jake's behavior, made me feel like I really did not matter at all to them. My dad chimed in during the call and doubled down. He said that Jake's behavior in the documentary was concerning, but that it didn't necessarily mean he had been a bad husband. They also insinuated that I might have been exaggerating my struggles back then and that they just wanted clarity. Their complete lack of remorse was like a slap in the face. I asked them if they had any idea how much pain this caused me and how much courage it took for me to even leave Jake in the first place. My mom brushed it off and said that I was being too emotional and that they didn't mean to hurt me in any way. My dad claimed that they were just trying to make informed decisions about rebuilding their relationship with me. At that point, I lost it. I told them that they were selfish, manipulative, and incapable of change. I said they had no place in my life or my family if they couldn't even acknowledge how deeply hurtful their actions were. They didn't even apologize. My mom just sighed like I was being difficult, and my dad muttered something about how they can't ever win with me. I hung up on them after, and I felt so overwhelmed with emotions. I was sad and angry at the way my parents were treating me after years of no communication. I can't believe I gave them another chance just for them to betray me all over again. But I was also relieved. I was actually glad that I wouldn't have to interact with them anymore. As horrible as it was, this actually did bring me some closure. I always worried about how my parents and I stopped communicating on bad terms, and somewhere in me, I always blamed myself for that. But now I can clearly see that I wasn't at fault at all. I talked to Eric about it, and he's been my rock through all of this. He was furious too, especially since my parents' actions directly impacted the stability of our family. Sophie doesn't deserve to be dragged into this, and neither does Eric. We agreed that I needed to protect our family from my parents' chaos. So I've blocked my parents on everything: phone, email, social media. I told the family friend who warned me what happened, and they were completely supportive of my decision to cut contact. They even apologized for being the one to break the news, but honestly, I'm grateful they did. I needed to know. I will admit that it hurts to realize that my parents will likely never be the people I need them to be, but I also know I can't keep putting myself in situations where I'm hurt over and over again. My focus is on my family: Eric, Sophie, and the life we've built together. They're my real family, and I won't let anyone ruin that. Thanks again for all your advice and support. It's been a tough road, but I'm learning to stand up for myself and prioritize the people who truly matter. Update 3. Hi again, this will hopefully be my last update. After everything that's happened, I've decided it's time to put a final stop to my parents' interference in my life. Things escalated in a way I never imagined, and I've had to make some tough decisions for the sake of my family. A couple of weeks ago, I got a call from Sophie's school. The principal wanted to let me know about an odd situation involving my parents. Apparently, they had reached out to the school directly and claimed that they were Sophie's grandparents. They apparently wanted to volunteer for an upcoming school event. They said it was their way of bonding with their granddaughter and insisted they had my permission. Thankfully, the school was suspicious enough to contact me first instead of just accepting their offer. I was horrified. I was pretty clear when I told them that I wanted nothing to do with them, but the fact that they chose to ignore everything I had to say and go straight for my family made me see red. They knew that I did not appreciate the fact that they showed up to Sophie's play without notice, and they knew that I wanted them to stay away from her. The fact that they crossed this line made it clear that they weren't going to stop unless I took serious action. Eric was equally furious. He said that he felt like they were trying to undermine us as parents and force their way into Sophie's life without our consent. That was the breaking point for me. I realized my parents were never going to respect boundaries or take no for an answer. They had already shown a complete disregard for my feelings and safety, and now they were involving Sophie in their mess. It was time to protect my family in a way I hadn't before. Eric and I decided to consult a lawyer about filing a restraining order. The process was emotionally draining, to say the least. I had to recount everything from their abandonment after my divorce to their recent behavior, including trying to contact Jake and showing up at Sophie's school play. The lawyer assured us we had a strong case and helped us file the paperwork. When my parents were served, their reaction was predictable. My mom left me a rambling voicemail where she was just crying about how I was tearing the family apart and accusing me of overreacting. My dad, on the other hand, sent an email from a new address since I blocked his old one, accusing me of being cold-hearted and saying I was poisoned by Eric's influence. Both of them also kept hinting that I was too dumb to know what I was doing and that I was going to regret what I was doing to them. All I could hear was the fact that they still couldn't take accountability for their actions and instead chose to double down on blaming me. They tried to contest the order as well, and they did their best to disprove every evidence I had of their treatment of me and my family. Unfortunately for them, I had a mountain of evidence against them, and that wasn't even with me trying to collect evidence. They had treated me so badly for years that even the judge saw it and granted the restraining order. The order includes provisions that prevent them from contacting me, Eric, or Sophie in any way, including through third parties. If they violate it, they'll face legal consequences. To make sure we're fully protected, I've taken additional steps. I told everyone in my life, friends and family, that if anyone tries to reach out to me on my parents' behalf, I'll cut them off immediately. Thankfully, no one has tested this boundary so far, and most people have been incredibly supportive. Since the restraining order was put in place, my parents have tried to contact me a few times through indirect means. They sent letters to my old address which were forwarded to me by my mail service, but I haven't opened them. I'm keeping them as evidence in case I need to prove they're still. This whole ordeal has been exhausting, both emotionally and physically. There's a part of me that feels sad about how things turned out. I wish my parents could have changed, but I've come to accept that they are who they are, and I can't keep sacrificing my peace and happiness hoping they'll become better people. Eric and I have decided to focus on moving forward. We're considering taking a family trip with Sophie to get a change of scenery and create some positive memories together. I'm also seeing a therapist to work through the lingering guilt and hurt from everything that's happened with my parents. If I'm being honest, I finally feel like this entire chapter of my life has come to an end. I've done everything I can to protect myself and my family, and I've set boundaries that I intend to enforce. My parents had plenty of chances to rebuild our relationship, and they blew every single one of them. Thank you to everyone who has supported me through this mess. Your advice and encouragement have meant the world to me, and I truly appreciate it. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Mom begged me to help my sister who broke her car in an accident. I said yes, but when I arrived, she forced me to stay in a hotel, then started treating me like her personal servant. Growing up, my older sister Kim was always a source of tension and pain for me. From as far back as I can remember, she harbored a deep-seated jealousy that shaped our relationship in ways that were far from what you would consider healthy. While many people encounter bullies in their lives, mine wasn't at school or in the neighborhood. Mine lived right under the same roof, sharing the same home with me. Even as a young child, I quickly learned that my sister could be quite mean and aggressive, especially when she was angry or jealous of me. Kim would always push me around or pinch me so hard that I would end up in tears if I dared to cross her in any way, whether by not listening to her or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She would retaliate by taking something of mine, usually my toys or my books, which were a big deal to me at the time. Kim would kick me occasionally at school, knowing that I could not stand up to her there since she was always surrounded by her friends. I remember feeling powerless, unable to defend myself against her because she was older and stronger than me. One afternoon, my sister convinced me that she would give me a haircut using some play scissors. Now, I had long blonde hair as a child and would always be admired for it. I tried to talk her out of giving me a haircut, but she kept pushing and pushing, so I just gave in. She started cutting my hair, and it wasn't just a small snip. Obviously, she had no experience and we were stupid to even do this, but she hacked away at my hair even when I asked her to stop. I remember feeling devastated as I watched clumps of my hair fall to the floor. The haircut was so bad that I burst out crying. She only laughed, looking at me as if this was the most normal thing in the world. When my dad saw what had happened, he rushed me to a salon, but there was little that could be done. The only solution was to cut it all short, much shorter than I ever wanted. It was a heartbreaking experience for me. As difficult as my sister was, what made the situation even harder to bear was the fact that my mother always seemed to take her side. Whenever I cried and went to my mom for comfort, hoping she would understand and protect me, she would dismiss my feelings, saying things like, "Sisters fight sometimes," or, "I used to do the same with my sisters when I was young." Her words made me feel like my pain didn't matter. My dad saw what was happening and would try to discipline my sister whenever she crossed the line. But every time he did, my mother would intervene, not to support me, but to protect Kim. She would scold my dad, telling him not to be so harsh with my sister. My mother would then scold me instead for not standing up for myself and getting Dad to do my dirty work. Amidst all the challenges I faced growing up at home, I was fortunate to meet Jasper, my high school boyfriend who would eventually go on to become my husband. From the very beginning, Jasper was different from anyone else in my life. He was always there for me. When we started dating, it didn't take him long to notice the stark differences and how my mother treated me compared to my sister. One thing that always stood out to Jasper was the way my mother would criticize my appearance while letting my sister Kim do whatever she pleased. If Kim and I were both getting ready to go out, my mom would always praise Kim's choices, no matter what she wore, while finding fault with mine. It didn't matter if I thought I looked good or felt confident. My mother always had something to say. She would often make remarks about my outfit, suggesting that I wear more girly clothes, warning me that if I didn't, my man might leave me. She would always comment that I was wearing too much makeup or very little makeup. My mom had made these comments once or twice in front of Jasper when he had come over for dinner at my house. I could see how much it bothered him, but he would try to keep his mouth shut. Normally, Jasper wasn't the type to just sit back and let things slide. Hence, the third time he had come over to our place, and my mother again started with me about my clothes and makeup, Jasper immediately stepped in to support me. He calmly but firmly told my mother that he liked the way I dressed and that he saw no issues with it. His defense of me caught my mother off guard. She laughed awkwardly, trying to brush off her comments as if they were just jokes. But we all knew better. As much as things were difficult between me and my sister, we had somehow managed to keep our relationship on relatively stable ground despite the weekly fights and underlying tension. But everything took a turn for the worst the day she brought her boyfriend Derek home for the first time. The moment Derek laid eyes on me, he blurted out, "Wow, Kim, I had no idea your younger sister is so hot." The words hung in the air, awkward and inappropriate. Kim immediately glared at Derek and then, as if I was somehow to blame for his crude remark, she turned and shot daggers at me with her eyes. I smiled awkwardly, even though I found his comment to be of extremely poor taste. As the afternoon went on, I tried to stay out of Derek's way, focusing on helping my mom in the kitchen or finding excuses to busy myself elsewhere. But by the evening, when we all settled in to watch a movie together as a family, it became impossible to completely avoid him. We were all in the same room, and that's when I started noticing something even more unsettling. I could feel Derek's eyes on me, staring at me a little too long from across the room. It wasn't just a casual glance. Every time our eyes met, he would flash a slight, creepy smile before turning his attention back to the TV, as if he was doing this intentionally. As a woman, you develop a sense for these things, an intuition that tells you when a man is looking at you in a way that feels wrong. Derek's gaze made my skin crawl. It was persistent, and it made me incredibly uncomfortable. I found myself shrinking into my seat, trying to make myself as small as possible, hoping he would stop. I avoided his gaze as much as I could, tried to focus on the movie, but it was hard to concentrate with the knowledge that he was watching me like that. After the movie ended, Kim made an announcement that caught me off guard. Derek would be staying over in her room because it was too late for him to drive back home. Despite feeling uneasy about Derek's earlier behavior, I tried to push my concerns aside. After all, I had no choice in the matter anyway. Later that night, I woke up with a craving for a midnight snack and remembered that I had a half-eaten chocolate bar stashed away in the fridge. I quietly made my way downstairs, hoping to grab it and head back to bed without making any noise. But as I entered the kitchen, I was startled to see Derek standing there shirtless, rummaging through our kitchen drawers. My first instinct was to turn and run back to my room, but then I reminded myself that this was my house. He was the guest, not me. Trying to stay calm, I ignored him and walked straight to the fridge, retrieving my chocolate. Derek turned and looked at me, seemingly surprised that I was there, but I continued to ignore him, keeping my focus on the chocolate bar as I prepared to head back upstairs. As I started to leave the kitchen, he suddenly called out, asking if I wanted an omelet. His tone was casual, as if it was perfectly normal to be making small talk with his girlfriend's younger sister in the middle of the night while standing shirtless. I firmly yelled back no, and quickly walked towards the staircase, my heart pounding. But before I could reach the top, I heard him running after me. In an instant, he grabbed me by the back of my shirt, pulling me back slightly. My heart raced as alarm bells went off in my head. He asked me if he had done something to piss me off, as if he couldn't understand why I was avoiding him and running away. Panic surged through me, and I yelled at him to stop chasing me and to leave me alone. I yanked myself free and bolted up the stairs, slamming my bedroom door behind me, my heart racing with a mix of fear and anger. The next morning, I knew I had to tell my parents what had happened. I sat down with them and recounted the incident, emphasizing how uncomfortable Derek had made me feel throughout the day, and how he was walking around our home shirtless. My dad listened carefully and immediately assured me that Derek would not be allowed to stay over again. His response was firm and protective, and I felt a small sense of relief knowing that he believed me and was taking action to keep me safe. But when Kim found out, she exploded with anger. She accused me of being jealous of her relationship with Derek, yelling at me in front of our parents that I was probably making everything up just to ruin things between them. Her words cut deep. I tried to explain to her how uncomfortable Derek had made me feel, how his behavior in the kitchen had scared me, how he had run after me to confront me, but she didn't care. She was too blinded by her attachment to him to see what was really happening. Even my mother felt like I was overreacting about Derek and that he seemed like a nice boy. Fortunately, my dad was on my side, so Kim was banned from ever bringing him home ever again. This whole situation made things even worse between me and my sister. I couldn't understand how my own sister could choose to believe her boyfriend over me, especially when I had nothing to gain by making up such a story. It was as if, in her eyes, I was the one trying to sabotage her happiness. After the whole ordeal with Derek, my sister made it her mission to keep her personal life as far away from me as possible. Whenever she was dating someone new and planned to bring him home for lunch or dinner, she would ask me to stay over at my best friend's place for the night or find some other excuse to be out of the house, so her boyfriends would not have to meet me. While I didn't mind getting out of the way most of the time, it was definitely inconvenient, especially when I had other plans or just wanted to relax at home. Fortunately, after I moved out to attend college, I didn't have to deal with this strange and uncomfortable arrangement anymore. I was admitted to one of the best universities in the country on a scholarship, and my parents were incredibly proud of me. I remember the day they visited my campus for the first time. They were absolutely blown away. My mother, who was never one to freely give compliments, actually praised me for my hard work. Though her words were begrudging and felt somewhat forced, they meant a lot to me because they were so rare. My father, of course, was beaming with pride. He had always been supportive of my academic pursuits, and seeing me get into such a prestigious institution was a validation of the faith he had always placed in me. Over the years, but while my parents celebrated my achievement, my sister never congratulated me on getting into college. It was clear to me that my success didn't sit well with her. Unlike me, my sister had taken a gap year after high school, and that gap year eventually turned into a permanent break from college. She never went back to school, and instead took up a job at my dad's golf club as a card attendant. What had started as a part-time gig to earn some extra money had turned into her full-time job. She told everyone how much she enjoyed the work, especially because it came with great tips, and for her that seemed to be enough. While I was focused on my studies and planning for a future that I hoped would be fulfilling and meaningful, she seemed content with where she was, even if it meant staying in a job that didn't offer much in the way of long-term prospects. Over the years, the more I excelled in my studies and moved forward with my life, the more it seemed to bother my sister. Rather than being happy for me, my success seemed to fuel my sister's resentment even more. Every time I came home during my college breaks, it was as if she made it her mission to bring me down a notch. She would find subtle ways to show her displeasure, often wrapped in backhanded comments that left me feeling uneasy. For instance, she would point out how thin my hair was getting, which was true to some extent because of the stress I was under, but instead of showing concern, she'd suggest that I was probably failing in college and that I should stop trying to be someone I'm not, implying that I was pushing myself too hard and needed to learn to take it easy. Whenever I achieved something academically and my parents expressed their pride, she would immediately dismiss it, claiming that the courses I was taking must have been easy. It was her way of minimizing my accomplishments. Despite the sting of her words, I did my best to ignore her comments. I didn't want to waste my energy trying to convince her of my academic abilities. After I graduated from college, Jasper and I took the next step in our relationship and moved in together while continuing to work at our respective jobs. Living with Jasper was a revelation for me. It was the first time I felt completely at ease in my own home. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, just the comfort of being with someone who loved and accepted me for who I was. Eventually, Jasper and I got married, and we now live in a much bigger place. Over the years, it's just been the two of us, and we're completely content with our lives. We don't have children, but that's something we've both agreed on and are happy with. Instead, we've focused on building our lives together, saving money, traveling to multiple countries, and indulging in the expensive hobbies we both enjoy. In stark contrast, my sister Kim continues to live with our parents even today. At one point, she did move out with a boyfriend, but that relationship ended in tragedy when he physically abused her and kicked her out. With no savings and nowhere else to go, she had to move back home again. It was a heartbreaking situation, and I did feel bad for her. However, my sister never learned from her mistake and has continued to date trashy guys even after that. This is why over the years, my mother has grown increasingly frustrated with my sister's behavior. Their relationship, which used to be so close and easygoing, has become strained and rocky. Since I lived in another city, I seldom went back home, so Kim and I had drifted even more apart over time, to the point where we barely exchanged any calls or texts. One night, I was jolted awake by a phone call from my mother. It was the middle of the night, and her voice trembled as she informed me that my sister had been in a serious car accident. The shock of the news hit me like a wave. I stayed up for hours anxiously waiting for updates from my parents. They called me regularly to keep me informed about my sister's condition, which was critical. As much as our relationship had soured over the years, she was still my older sister, and the idea of her being seriously hurt was terrifying. I wanted to fly back home immediately to be there for her and my parents, but my dad, knowing how demanding my job was, assured me that they would take care of everything. He told me that my sister would be okay and that there was no need for me to disrupt my work. Despite his reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and helplessness that gnawed at me. I wanted to be there to help in some way. My sister ended up staying in the hospital for a month due to the severity of her injuries. During that time, my mother took on the full responsibility of caring for her. Even when my sister was discharged, she had to take bed rest at home to continue to recover. Hence, I decided to have a conversation with my parents about hiring a full-time nanny to help take care of my sister. Given how exhausted my mother was and the challenges she was facing, it seemed like the most practical solution, and I was willing to pay for everything. However, when my sister found out about this plan, she was furious. She yelled at me for putting terrible ideas into our parents' heads, insisting that she wasn't an invalid and that she wasn't comfortable with a stranger helping her out. I tried to explain how much strain this was putting on our mother, but my sister cut me off, telling me to mind my own business. In the end, my parents didn't force her to agree to the nanny, likely because they felt bad for her and wanted to avoid any further conflict. Then just 2 weeks ago, I received a call from my mother. She was in tears, her voice trembling with exhaustion and desperation. She begged me to come back home, explaining that she felt utterly drained from taking care of my sister and couldn't handle it alone anymore. She pleaded with me to take a break from my job, or even leave it if necessary, and come stay with her for at least 2 months. It was clear that she was at her breaking point, and I felt extremely guilty about it. I told her that I would think about it and discuss the situation with Jasper. He was completely against the idea, knowing all too well how my sister had mistreated me over the years. He was concerned about the toll it would take on me, both emotionally and mentally. But despite his reservations, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had a moral obligation to help my mother, who was clearly in need. I explained to Jasper how much this meant to me, and eventually he understood my position. He recognized that my mother was in a difficult situation and that I felt a duty to support her. Hence, I approached my boss to discuss taking some time off. Thankfully, my boss was understanding and granted me a 1-month leave. Additionally, I was allowed to work from home for the following month as long as I completed all my assignments. This was the best outcome I could have hoped for, a compromise that allowed me to be there for my family while still maintaining my job. Feeling relieved and somewhat optimistic about the situation, I booked my tickets in hopes of surprising my mother and prepared to fly back home. Although I knew this wouldn't be an easy time, I was determined to do what I could to help my mother and make the best of the circumstances. When I finally arrived home, my sister Kim was the one who opened the door. I was taken aback to see her as she looked weary, leaning heavily on crutches to support her. She was stunned to see me as well. I greeted her with a smile and moved in to hug her, but she appeared indifferent. She asked me sharply what on earth I was doing there. I explained that I was there to surprise Mom and to help out however I could. Hearing this, Kim's face twisted in anger. She told me that I had no right to just show up unannounced and that she didn't appreciate my presence. She even had the audacity to suggest that I wait outside until Mom came back home. As she railed at me, I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. I reminded her that this wasn't her decision to make, and it was actually Mom who had asked me to come home to help her out since she was exhausted. I pushed past her into the house with my luggage, telling her that she could ask Mom if she didn't believe me. Kim turned and with a loud slam retreated into her room, leaving me standing in the hallway feeling both frustrated and disheartened. Later, when Mom returned from the store, she was genuinely happy to see me. She rushed to give me a warm hug, the kind of hug that made all the stress of the journey and the tension with Kim seem momentarily worth it. We made small talk and started unpacking the groceries together. But then Kim emerged from her room, still seething, and confronted Mom, demanding to know if it was true that she had invited me back to help take care of her. When Mom confirmed it, a heated argument erupted between the both of them. Kim accused Mom of betraying her and of embarrassing her by inviting me to help her out, especially when she knew how much she disliked me. Mom, trying to stay calm, asked Kim what the real issue was, why my presence was such a big deal, and that she should get over our past. That's when Kim broke down, tears streaming down her face. She cried out, saying that all her life she was always looked down on because of my accomplishments and that she didn't want me anywhere near her at such a vulnerable time. She confessed that she was still reeling from the accident, still struggling with her recovery, and having me there every moment only amplified her insecurities and frustrations over her own life. Kim went on to say that if we truly cared about her well-being, I would leave and stay in a hotel instead of in the house with them. It was heartbreaking to realize that despite everything, despite all the years that had passed, the old wounds between us had never really healed. My mom and I tried to talk her out of it and told her how ridiculous she sounded, but she insisted that she didn't want me living with them. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to Kim's demand and left to stay at a nearby hotel. My dad was absolutely furious with Kim for treating me this way, but I reassured him that I would be fine. I knew how much Kim was struggling, and I wanted her to feel comfortable while she recovered, even if it meant I had to sacrifice my own comfort. I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, by doing this for her, she would try to mend our broken relationship. Over the next few days, I came over and spent a few hours at my parents' house helping out my mom wherever I could. Kim avoided me as much as she could and refused to talk to me. Every morning before coming over, I would text her if she wanted me to buy her breakfast, hoping that this was a way to reconnect. Unfortunately, Kim saw this as an opportunity to take advantage of me. She began treating me like an on-call maid, constantly ordering me to bring her food or fetch things for her just because she knew that she didn't have to pay for anything. At first, I tried not to complain, but gradually Kim's demands grew more unreasonable, and her attitude became more hostile. She would bark orders at me and snap if I didn't get something exactly right. It felt like I couldn't do anything to please her, no matter how hard I tried. The breaking point came when I brought her a coffee from her favorite coffee place, and she exploded in anger because it didn't have any foam. Without warning, she hurled the cold coffee at me and yelled at me for being worthless. I was so pissed at her behavior that I finally snapped. I told her she was acting like a child and that I was done being her servant. I told her that she should be grateful that I was even there to help out since Mom was clearly getting sick of her. I was so angry that I spit out that maybe she deserved the pain she was going through, that it was karma for how she had treated others, including me, all these years. As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I had crossed a line, but I was just too angry to care at that moment. I stormed out of her room, leaving her in stunned silence. I knew my words were harsh, and they weren't truly how I felt, but the damage was done. Since that confrontation, Kim has been calling our cousins and other relatives, painting me as the villain in this situation. She's been telling everyone how I'm a spoiled brat, how I lashed out at her when she was at her most vulnerable, and how this is exactly why she didn't want me around in the first place. Now I'm torn. On one hand, I feel terrible for what I said. I know it wasn't right, and I hate that I let my anger get the best of me. On the other hand, I'm exhausted from constantly being treated like the bad guy, especially when all I wanted to do was help. Update 1. I would like to clarify that I have reached out and apologized to my sister already for what I said to her. My parents understand that I said this only out of frustration. Also, a lot of people have pointed out that my sister might be suffering from depression, and I think this might be true based on her behavior. I plan on telling my parents to convince my sister to see a therapist about her issues. Update 2. I spoke with my husband about the situation, and he strongly urged me to return home immediately, expressing his frustration over how my sister has been treating me. I have informed my parents that I've had enough and will be going back home. If they decide to hire a full-time nanny to help with my sister, I'll be more than willing to cover the cost as I feel guilty about my mom handling everything on her own. However, I'm firm in my decision to not spend another moment dealing with Kim. Kim has also refused to seek therapy and continues to blame me for her behavior. Update 3. It's been a few days since I have come back home to Jasper. I am fully enjoying my remaining days of leave, dedicating my time to reading and relaxing by the pool. I intend to return to work next month, but for now, I'm focusing on taking care of myself. Before I left my hometown, I did confront my sister one last time. I told her how her behavior has been hurtful to me throughout our lives and how she has continued to act like a bully. I pointed out that despite being an adult, she still depended on our parents like a child, and she should definitely take a long, hard look at her life and think about improving it since our parents were getting too old to take care of her. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she yelled back that she knew what she was doing and that I had no right to lecture her about her life. She then asked me to get out of her room as she always does. I agree with many of the comments, and I can't help but feel that my parents share some of the blame. They've always coddled my sister and never pushed her to be more independent or responsible. Now it seems like they're stuck with her forever. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Adoptive mom, who I've always thanked and owed my life to, asked me to cancel my wedding so my fiancé could marry my stepsister instead of me the day before our wedding. Hi, the incident I'll be talking about is between my stepmom, her biological daughter, and me. I, 25F, have been living with my stepmother, Mary, 45F, since I was 5. My biological mom was an alcoholic and extremely abusive to me. My dad, fed up with her behavior, filed for divorce and demanded full custody of me due to her negligence. Unfortunately, her issues couldn't be proved in court, so both my parents shared mutual custody, with my mother having me most days. But her ignorant behavior soon caught up with her when one day she left me home alone and I accidentally got access to the balcony. My neighbors noticed and called Child Protective Services on her. From then on, I started living with my dad. Things were tough at first, but once he met Mary, they changed for the better. Mary was my dad's lawyer's assistant. They met during the divorce proceedings and got into a relationship soon after that. Mary was herself divorced and had a daughter, Jane, who was 2 years younger than me. Jane suffered from a neurological condition and was in a wheelchair permanently. The disease also affected her mentally, as she had learning disabilities. I met Mary and Jane when I was 4. At first, it was a bit awkward because I had been pretty closed off to strangers due to my biological mother. But Mary understood my situation and took things slow, helping me to open up more. With time, I grew extremely close to both her and Jane in a matter of weeks, and that's when my dad decided to marry her. Their wedding, as far as I remember, was very personal, with only my grandparents and Mary's parents present. I used to call her Mary before the wedding, but I've called her Mom ever since. Things started to get better for us from that point on, as Mary opened her own practice and my dad, who was a construction worker, opened a construction company. Soon his business boomed, and from that point on, we never faced a day of adversity in financial terms. Both Jane and I went to the best schools and had good lives. I always considered Jane my sibling, helping her with whatever she needed and standing up for her whenever necessary. Even Mary felt like the only mother I had since childhood because she had always been there for me. I've been extremely grateful to her all my life because she was the reason I was alive and thriving, and I have never failed to show it to her. We moved to a much better neighborhood when I started high school, and that's where I met my boyfriend, Ryan. Ryan lived 2 blocks down and was my classmate. We started going to school together once we realized we were from the same area and became good friends. He used to visit my house quite often and got along well with everyone, especially Jane. He was one of the few people she was comfortable around, and we all had a lot of fun together. By the end of last year, he asked me out and I said yes. When I told my family about this, everyone seemed happy except for Jane. From that day on, Jane frequently became irritated with me, and we didn't talk much. Mary saw Jane's behavior and blamed it on her recent medication change. I understood and decided not to talk to her much to avoid fights and give her stress. So Ryan and I applied to many colleges and we fortunately got into the same one, which was a pretty good school. Everyone was overjoyed at our achievement, and Ryan and I couldn't be happier. Jane was still kind of distant with me, so I decided to talk to her before I left and sort all out because after all, she was family. After talking for hours, I realized, by the way she talked about Ryan, that she had a crush on him. Everything made sense, but I wasn't going to trade my boyfriend to sort things out, so I decided not to touch the topic at all. Jane and I got to okay terms before I left, and I was satisfied with that. Before I left, I told Mary how I thought Jane had a crush on Ryan and that it might make sense for her to ask Jane about it so that it wouldn't create further issues between us. She assured me that she'd take care of it and let me know that I always had her support. I got emotional at the thought of leaving my mom, and we both cried a little in the kitchen. A few weeks after this talk, I left with Ryan to go and set up my college dorm room. The next 4 years were great academically. I learned a lot, was a topper in most subjects, and bagged a few internships before my peers. I was overall doing well. My relationship with Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't at its best. We had been having issues since the beginning of college and were on and off for most of the time. I also heard a few rumors that he had cheated on me, so by the end of college, our relationship was pretty much hanging by a thread. Given our history, we both mutually decided that we should take a break for some time to gather ourselves together. I went back home to take a break after my degree for a few months and told my parents about the breakup. They weren't as surprised as I had thought, but that didn't seem fishy. Jane was also about to finish high school and asked if I could get Ryan to talk to her because she was planning on adopting the same major and needed guidance. I was a little hesitant about calling Ryan so soon after our breakup and suggested some of my friends from the same major, but she insisted she wanted to talk to Ryan only. So I decided to keep my feelings aside for Jane and texted him. After talking to her, Ryan called me and let me know that Jane was being extremely flirtatious during the call and that he wasn't interested in her like that. I told Mary about it, and she said that it shouldn't be an issue for me because Ryan and I were broken up. I didn't think much of it after that. A few years later, Jane was about to complete college, and I was working, still staying at my parents' house. I bumped into Ryan while grocery shopping, and he was doing well, settled, and enjoying life. We got to talking and met again a few times for lunches and brunches. We eventually ended up rekindling our relationship, and a few months into it, he asked me to marry him, to which I obviously said yes. The news of our relationship wasn't welcomed as expected by Mary, and Jane's disdain was understandable too, but it was the news of my engagement that wreaked havoc at my house. Jane threw a huge tantrum which led to her having an anxiety attack, and she was taken to the ER. She was fine, but due to her predispositions, the doctors asked us to take good care of her and not introduce any stress. After discussing it with Mary and my dad, we decided that it was best for me to move out. I moved out soon after the incident and used to come home on weekends. Jane had now made peace with my engagement and was pretty excited about the wedding. She was originally going to be my maid of honor, but after her reaction to the engagement news, I decided to let her be a bridesmaid. Everything was going well with everyone, especially Mary, who was trying to be a part of every small detail of my wedding and was also paying for half of it. I couldn't have been more thankful to her for everything and even mentioned it in my rehearsal dinner speech 2 days before my wedding. On the night of my rehearsal dinner, everyone was drunk beyond measure, and Mary asked if she could talk to me in private. I thought it was going to be a mother-daughter catharsis, so I suggested we both talk in my room. I hadn't expected what was about to go down. So Mary sat me down and began telling me how grateful she was to have a child like me, making me emotional. She continued that she had similar wishes for Jane, but that was a far stretch and began to cry. I consoled her and she asked me if I loved her. I said yes. Then she asked if I owed my life to her. It was an absurd question, but I answered with a yes again. Upon hearing this, she stood up and asked me for a favor. When I asked what it was, she said that since I owed her everything I had, she wanted me to share a little of it with my sister Jane. I was confused and asked what she wanted me to share. What she said next was way beyond normal. She said that I, in comparison to Jane, had a way better life, whereas she was surrounded only by a few, one of whom was Ryan. She claimed that she had known about Jane's attraction towards Ryan since childhood, but didn't do anything about it until we broke up after college. She continued that Ryan was a very understanding man and perfect for Jane. She asked me to break my engagement with Ryan and asked him to marry Jane instead. I couldn't believe what I heard and asked her to shut up, but she didn't. She said that this was the only way I could pay my dues to her, as she had accepted me as her own blood and taken care of me like her own child. She said she wished for Jane to have a relationship for the future too, and Ryan was the one guy she was sure wouldn't break her girl's heart. She knew Ryan wasn't interested in Jane like that, which was why she wanted me to convince him. I couldn't process what was happening and in a fit of rage kicked her out of my room, with her yelling that I should consider it and she'd be indebted to me for life if I did this one thing for her daughter. Her yelling attracted some attention, and my dad came asking me what was up. I didn't answer and just locked him and Mary out. I cried in my room and didn't realize when I had fallen asleep. The next day, I woke up late and was asked by my dad to visit him in his room. Mary was there with swollen eyes from crying. He said that what I did last night wasn't cool and that treating Mary, the woman who raised me like that, and kicking her out wasn't something I should have done. I realized at that point that he knew nothing about what had asked of me. As I was about to tell him, Mary held my hand tightly, signaling me not to tell the truth. I shrugged off her hand, and before I could say anything, we heard a scream from Jane's room. She had fallen in the bathroom and had cuts on her legs. We didn't have enough first aid, so my dad decided to take her to the ER as soon as possible and discuss the issue with me and Mary later. Mary, from that point on, has been pleading with me not to tell my dad the truth and cause harm to her relationship. I don't wish to engage in conversation with her and have been sitting in my room. What if I don't give Mary a chance to explain herself or apologize before I tell my dad about what she asked of me? Update 1. Hi. Thank you everyone for such a kind response. I did initially realize that Mary was at fault, but I doubted myself after my father tried to intervene. I have also decided to take advice from the comments and will be telling Ryan first before my father. Also, some people have been asking how I wasn't aware of her intentions beforehand when I knew Jane had a crush on Ryan. The thing is, everyone, including Ryan, thought it was an innocent crush and nothing more. There wasn't a time when Ryan had reciprocated Jane's feelings through actions or words, but I think I should have been more careful with the cues because one thing that I now think of as weird is that during my dress shopping, Mary also decided to get Jane a wedding dress to fulfill her wish of seeing both her daughters in wedding dresses, as it might have been difficult for Jane to find a husband due to her condition and people's unwarranted prejudices regarding Jane. She was fine with some cuts on her legs that were taken care of well. She had no idea about what Mary had asked of me, and honestly, I didn't know how she would react once she got to know. Anyway, when I went to see Jane after she was back, I saw Mary standing in the corner, her face turning pale as soon as I called my dad. I had to ask for car keys to visit Ryan. Mary fainted on the spot, thinking I might air her out. I helped her to the bed, and Dad decided to stay beside her, silently blaming her condition on me. I didn't have time to explain anything to him and immediately left after taking the keys to the car. I am writing this part after I have met Ryan. So I went and asked Ryan to meet me in my car to avoid unwanted attention. He realized from my voice that it was serious and came down rushing. I told him everything that had happened last night and made him aware of the fact that maybe Jane's little crush wasn't so little after all. He was more shocked than I was because he had respected Mary a lot for being an excellent woman and such a caring mother to me. He said that such a big revelation would lead to a lot of unpacking, so the best option would be to stall the wedding for a few weeks. He made it very clear that no matter what happens, he is my back and is willing to elope if that's what it takes to be with me. He wanted to be there while I told my dad about this, but I asked him not to as it was a family matter first. He agreed and asked me to call him immediately after I was done telling, and meanwhile, he would announce to his side of the guests that the wedding was going to be postponed due to some personal issues. As happy as I was to have someone like Ryan around me, I was still scared because this whole scenario could lead to sour relationships with my dad, who had always been there for me since day one. I had already lost a mother yesterday and was not up for losing a dad as well. Update 2. So a lot went down after the last update. I gathered all the courage I could and went back to tell my father about it. Mary opened the door and let me in, but she didn't look as stressed as before. I entered the room and saw my dad sitting on the bed with Jane lying down. He looked angry and asked me to take a seat. He told me that he knew what had gone down last night and was extremely disappointed in me. I asked him what he was talking about, and he told me that Mary had told him how I berated her last night, saying that she wasn't my real mother and that Jane wasn't family, so I didn't wish to have them at the wedding. According to my dad, when Mary tried to calm me down, I told her that I didn't want her disabled daughter spoiling my wedding pictures. I couldn't believe how cunning Mary was. I tried to tell my dad the truth about her, which he was duly shocked by, but he said that this was a case of my words against Mary's words, and there was no way for him to believe either version as the truth, so maybe we should sort it out for now. Jane was constantly saying how her mom's side of the story was correct, and now I was sure that Mary had told her daughter the truth and asked her to play along. I very clearly told my dad that the wedding had been postponed because I didn't care who he thought was telling the truth, but it was absolutely unacceptable to me to have someone who had tried to emotionally manipulate me into giving up the love of my life. Mary intervened and quickly said that she wanted to apologize if she had done anything wrong while raising me and wished for our relationship to get a second chance by being a part of my wedding. My dad was also insisting that I move on and let the wedding happen smoothly because a lot of money had been spent, but I decided not to pay heed to their requests and moved out that very day. I left to stay at Ryan's house, and it has been 2 days since then. I didn't really have the energy to deal with anything, so I turned my social media accounts off. I haven't been contacted by my dad and Mary so far, but I've been getting calls from some relatives which I didn't answer, assuming they must be regarding the cancellation of the wedding. Things are pretty stressful right now, and I hope find a way to sort things out soon. Update 3. This update comes a week after the last one, when the wedding was postponed, and I left my parents' house. So a week after the constant calls, I got to hear from Ryan, who was friends with my dad on Facebook, that he had put up a post about me on his wall. Apparently, after our relatives had tried to find out the reason for the wedding cancellation for me and got no answers, they decided to bug my dad and Mary about it. They had tried to contact me to at least make a public announcement as a family, but after they couldn't get in touch with me, he made that post. He mentioned in that post how he, Mary, and Jane were begging me not to ruin their reputation over petty family issues and respond to them because talking was the only way out of this. This posted more damage to the already messed up situation with our relatives, and all his friends on Facebook were now speculating about the problem and spreading rumors. The worst one I heard was that I had stolen money for the wedding and then cheated on Ryan. Ryan was getting stressed about all this, and I talked to him, thinking that he might get cold feet, but to my surprise, he again assured me that he was going to marry me irrespective of whatever came our way. I still hadn't responded to the post and was going to talk to my parents a day after the post to at least be rational before the big confrontation. But things took a different route. That same evening, I got a call from my grandma, my biological mom's mother. I hadn't mentioned her before because she wasn't relevant to the incident, but she has been an important part of my life. She has always protected me and saved me from my mother and had even helped my dad financially. She usually didn't involve herself in our matters, but her intervening in this incident meant something big had happened. Apparently, she had gotten wind of everything and directly confronted my father about it. He told her what he believed was true Mary's version. Grandma trusted me and felt something was fishy, so she decided to talk to me about it next. She told me she knew how much I loved Mary and Jane, and there was no way I would have considered them not my family. I got emotional at the possibility of someone from my family finally believing my side and told my grandma everything. She said she couldn't believe how vile Mary was and how I was saved from her ill intentions due to her being under the influence. I told her how I feared losing my dad, and she asked me to talk to my parents first while she tried to find a solution. The next day, I decided to go back to my house and talk to my parents. I was blamed over and again for making a spectacle of our family. I was honestly done with them within just a few minutes and asked if I could have a moment alone with Mary. We went to the other room, and I asked why she was doing this to me when all my life I had loved her. She said that whatever she had said was something she had been feeling and never wished to burden it on me. She asked me to forget about it all as a mistake and move on from it. I said that her losing control and asking so much of me wasn't acceptable at any cost, and I was going to stand by the truth no matter what, which led to her warning me of the consequences. Hearing this, I went outside and asked my dad one last time if he would even be willing to believe my version of what Mary had asked of me. He said what I was blaming Mary for was very serious, and it wasn't possible for him to believe something so vile about the woman he had loved for so many years. He couldn't believe his own blood. But anyway, I had gotten my answer and I stormed out of their house. The next thing I hear is that they have been telling people that I have abandoned them, so they were going no contact with me as well. I knew my grandma must be up to something, so Ryan and I will be visiting her in her country home this weekend. Update 4. I'll start this update with some good news. Once Ryan and I reached my grandma's beautiful house, she suggested that since my parents had created such a messy situation, we should consider eloping and getting married in her backyard instead. Ryan thought of it as a good idea and called his folks to ask for permission. They were very happy about us getting married, so the next day my grandma called her local priest, and Ryan and I were married. He announced the news to everyone via his Facebook. The post did get a few comments, but we decided to check them out once we were back home. My dad and Mary had also seen the post and recognized the background, so they began bombarding my grandma's phone with calls and texts. My grandma replied back to my parents, who were acting so desperately, and reminded them that they were the ones who had gone bad-mouthing me. so they shouldn't be surprised by this now, and ended the conversation. After the event, I told my grandma what happened at my parents' house and asked if she had planned to do anything. She asked me what I wanted, and I told her very clearly that after Mary's so-called threat, I wished to expose her in front of my dad, assuming Jane already knew what her mother was up to. My grandma then revealed the plan to me. She said she had this huge chunk of alimony money from her divorce back in the day, and she would spread the news saying that she was going to give all that money to me to start a fresh life after my parents had abandoned me. According to her judgment, she was sure that my dad and Mary would both want a share of the money, and she'd pretend to give it to them if Mary confessed, saying that she had evidence otherwise because I had accidentally called her that night. I was married to the man I loved and had a family with my grandma, so I had nothing to lose and decided to give this a shot. The next day, my grandma called my dad and let him know that she was going to give me her money because they had cut contact with me. Just as she expected, they were shocked and wanted to talk in person. So my dad, Mary, and Jane were at my grandma's house the next evening. They congratulated me and Ryan, but nothing much happened after that. My grandma had decided to have a talk with them the next day. As everyone was done with dinner, Mary asked if we could talk privately. She began talking about how my life was finally at peace with me getting married without the drama and with all this new money. I asked her what her purpose for the private conversation was because I didn't wish to engage with her unnecessarily. She said that whatever she had done that night was extremely inappropriate. I asked her to say what she did because I wanted her to feel ashamed of herself after spoiling my dynamic with my father and maybe Jane. She apologized very clearly for asking me to leave Ryan and convince him to marry Jane instead. She continued saying it was all her motherly instinct and that is yet again the reason we were having this talk. I expected her to say something along the lines of how I was her daughter too and how she felt remorse and wanted to make amends by telling the truth. To the contrary, she told me that the kind of money I had now could help Jane settle and get a better future. I didn't cut her off and let her continue. She kept trying to convince me to give half the money I had to Jane because I could earn more, whereas life was already tougher for Jane, and now with the love of her life married to me, this was the least I could do for her. I didn't say anything to her and began looking at the kitchen door behind her. I don't know how, but it must have been God's will that halfway through the conversation, my dad had come looking for us and he decided to stay quiet and listen to what Mary was saying. She didn't realize he was right behind her because she was too busy explaining herself to me. As soon as I looked at my dad after she was done, she realized he had been there the whole while and what a blunder she had committed. Mary tried to cover up whatever was said during the conversation and instead revealed a lot more about how she had known all this while and was doing this all for Jane. My dad immediately called Jane and asked her if she knew about all this. Looking at the stressful situation, she realized it was best for her to tell the truth. My dad turned towards me and began apologizing for not believing me in the first place and told Mary and Jane to leave the house as soon as they could the next morning because he had a lot to think about. Mary tried pleading, citing Jane's condition, but Dad wasn't willing to hear anything. I asked my dad to go and rest in his room because this was a lot to take in. Ryan escorted Dad, whereas Mary and Jane decided to stay in another room, at least until they left. No one offered them any sympathy, and we could tell Mary had seen it coming. I cried that night thinking about how bad things had gotten and how we were a happy family just a few months ago. Ryan consoled me, saying that he was going to be my real family from now on. The next day, Mary and Jane left, and my dad left 2 days later after apologizing to me a lot for not trusting me in the first place. I told him that his doubt about me might have hurt our relationship and that we should take it slow from now on. He looked dejected but agreed to give me some space. Ryan and I also left the same day, thanking my grandma for all she had done for me. I asked her to come and stay at my place for a while, and she might visit next summer. Update 5. Since a lot of you have been asking about what happened with my dad and Mary, I'm here writing this update 4 months later. So my dad decided to divorce Mary but still wanted to stay in Jane's life if she wished, which Mary denied. Mary had tried a lot to win him back, but it didn't work. She never apologized to me for everything she had put me through. Her justification was that whatever she had done was for her child and hence it was okay. I was just happy that I wouldn't have to deal with her anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 9. BF moved in with his nephew but started being mean to him for being different from my athletic son. When I planned to break up with him, I found out he was cheating the whole time. 4 years ago, I met Bob, 40M. Bob had recently become the guardian of his nephew, Ben, after the death of Ben's parents in a car accident. Ben is the same age as my son Jason, 11 at the time, now 15. At first, it seemed perfect. I was over the moon at finding a man who was not put off by the prospect of taking on a soon-to-be teenage stepson. Jason's father is not in the picture, and in spite of being very different personalities, the boys got along from the beginning. So Bob and Ben moved into my house within less than a year. Ben was always a quieter, more creative kid, where Jason is more athletic and boisterous, and from the start, I got the sense that Bob understood Jason's way of being more than he did Ben's. At first, he would take them both to sports games, but Ben obviously had no interest, and so pretty soon he just took Jason. At the time, it seemed like a natural choice. Ben was bored at the games, and Jason honestly reveled in having all Bob's attention. But after that, things started unraveling. As they grew older, the difference in the boys became more obvious. Their choices of clothing, hairstyle, friends, music, hobbies, etc., and so did Bob's preference. He started making little comments comparing them and encouraging Ben to be more like Jason. At first, it seemed like he was trying to be helpful, thinking that Jason's way of being was healthier. He's more outgoing, has a more active social life, etc., because that's what he remembered from his own experience. But after a while, there was clear snideness there which it was impossible not to hear. My son has always had a strong protective streak/sense of fairness, and in spite of their differences and the late age they were introduced, he and Ben are very close. So Jason's reaction to Bob's remarks favoring him was to take Ben's side. He stopped going to games with Bob and generally liking him, and for a while became openly hostile on Ben's behalf. That stopped once he and Bob had a major argument. Jason backed down at that point because he told me he realized that if he kept making himself unpleasant, Bob and I might break up, in which case Ben would have to leave too. Since then, with a few exceptions, he has been coldly civil. Meanwhile, Bob has come to believe Ben is gay based on what I consider spurious evidence. Not that it matters to me whether he is or not. He wanted to send him to a military-type reform school, and when I vetoed that, his behavior towards Ben has escalated to a subtle kind of downright nastiness. Needless to say, all of the above strained Bob's and my relationship to breaking point, and then broke it. Seeing his ongoing behavior towards a child who needs him, I can no longer look at him with anything but disgust. The thought of him touching me makes my skin crawl, and I desperately want him out of my house. We're not married, and it's still in my sole name, thank God. But now I have the same problem Jason was worried about. If I end the relationship and kick Bob out, Ben will have to go too since legally I have no tie to him whatsoever. He's 15 now, and although he has borne everything by stoically ignoring Bob, I can't in good conscience let that man be solely responsible for him. For what it's worth, I've always tried to stick up for him and get Bob to see that there are many types of boy in the world and all of them are equally okay. Not to mention, I don't think Jason would ever forgive me if I did. I would happily take guardianship of Ben if I could, even if Bob made no financial contribution at all. We could manage if we cut back on luxuries. My concern is that I am far from sure Bob would agree. However he personally feels about Ben, Ben is still his flesh and blood, and Bob feels strongly about that. To be honest, I think it's part of the reason he resents Ben so much. Ben is the last of the line and not turning out how Bob thinks his family should be represented. If I were to start a conversation along those lines and Bob refused to allow Ben to stay, it would be incredibly difficult to roll back. The idea of having to continue to play a supportive wife to stop him leaving of his own accord for another 2.5 years till Ben turns 18 sounds like a nightmare, but the alternative is worse. What is the best way to manage and get through this? Edit. Thank you all so much for your support, advice, and kind words. Your comments have given me a lot to think about, and I will be making contact with a family lawyer shortly. Update. Hi again everyone. I posted about my family problem about a month ago, and was bowled over by the amount of kind and extremely helpful comments I got. Someone requested an update, so I'm posting now to tell you what's happened since. To be honest, it's also to unburden myself. The boys are really sweet, but I obviously can't talk to them about these things, and there aren't a lot of people in my life I feel comfortable sharing all the details with. I suppose I'm embarrassed. The week after my original post, I met with a family lawyer I know to go over options. I actually wrote down the legal suggestions posted here to discuss with her, but unfortunately, after going over each and several others in detail, we had to conclude that for each one, while it might technically be feasible, it would either take too long to be practical or require things from Bob or from Ben which for various reasons were not ideal. Following the meeting, I was mulling things over and decided to take a long hard look at our finances to see what might be affordable as a compromise, such as perhaps sending Ben to a good boarding school and pay tuition up front so that if I then left Bob, it would be easier and cheaper for him to leave Ben there rather than move him to a different school. Anyway, I went over our financial records with a fine-toothed comb, and that's when I discovered Bob was cheating on me, and it had been for the entirety of our relationship. It turns out that prior to Ben's parents' death, Bob had been about to move in with another woman. This woman didn't want kids, so when Bob was suddenly faced with taking custody of Ben or seeing him placed in foster care, she made it clear she would not be involved. For the record, I can't say I blame her. I love my boys with all my heart, but asking someone who never wanted kids to parent a bereaved 11-year-old she has never met is not in anyone's best interests, in my opinion. When I confronted him about the affair, he didn't even attempt to deny it. He seemed ashamed, and just asked, "What happened next?" So I told him that next he was going to get his stuff and get out of my house. But first, ask Ben if he wants to go or stay because it wouldn't be fair to disrupt the poor kid's life any further. Ben quickly said he preferred to stay, and Bob seemed frankly relieved. He moved out that weekend, and I haven't seen him since. We've been in touch by text to discuss financial arrangements though, and last week he sent me money to cover Ben's basic expenses. Nothing like as much as child support, but under the circumstances, I'll take it and be glad. From his attitude, I take it that he's seeing this as a long-term thing, but even if he doesn't, according to the family lawyer, his leaving Ben with me even for a while, along with Ben's age and the fact that Bob is his guardian rather than his father, would make it easier to build a case for Ben to stay even if Bob does try to fight it. The lawyer is confident that such a battle could be won or at least dragged out till Ben is 18 and it doesn't matter anymore. So that, as you can imagine, has been an enormous relief. That makes it that much harder to admit that finding out about Bob still hit me hard. The fact is that even though I was absolutely done with him and wanted him out, there was a time I truly believed he wanted to be with me and that we could build a life together. I knew our relationship wasn't a romance for the ages or anything like that, but it was by far the best I'd had since before my son was born, and I really thought we cared for and valued one another. Now I realized that all he ever wanted from me was a mother for Ben. He as good as admitted it, and in retrospect it makes complete sense. That's why he never wanted to get married or buy into my house even though I offered, though now of course I am grateful because he wanted to make it as easy as possible to split for me once Ben was old enough to no longer require my services. I think it might even explain why he was so hard on Ben and grasping at straws for reasons to send him away. I never expected it of him based on what else I knew, or I never would have been with him, but if he was blaming Ben for getting in the way of his life and simultaneously feeling guilty for that, could turn a mild-mannered person mean. I think maybe he even thought if Ben was away most of the time, the other woman would be willing to compromise for a few years. I don't know. I've even been wondering whether he decided to pursue me before we'd even met. The boys met first through an extracurricular where they became friends. It's possible that Jason mentioned my being single in passing, allowing Bob to identify me as potentially suitable before we ever met. I'm sorry this is such a mopey post. I truly am grateful for the way things worked out. I think it's the best possible solution for everyone under the circumstances, and not one I could have achieved without Bob's help. And the boys have been wonderful. They didn't know I was trying to get Bob out anyway, so they've been treating me very gently, or as gently as you can expect teenage boys to be anyway, and trying to pretend they aren't thrilled Bob is gone when I'm in the room. I'm glad of that, to be honest. I am so grateful he's gone and Ben is still safe here with us. I just need a bit of time to really remember it, I think. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.